Just tell us when we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the VAD. My name is Thunder. I am joined today by Slayer and Baldingos once again back on the desk to join me, boys, for our final week of the VAD where everything is getting wrapped up. It's been a little while, Slayer, since we've last seen you. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about these games tonight?
Man, I thought the last time I was able to take a look at VAD week 5, I thought that was hectic, especially for Group B. And now I'm back and I'm
Yes.
like, hey, we're gonna up the stakes about 9,000%. So as
Mm-hmm.
I can feel the pressure just sitting here and the analyst desk, and I can't even imagine what the pressure is mounting for teams like Falcons and Unicorns.
Yeah, I think that week 5 was when we first had that three-way tie formulate between those Group B teams, and they're basically at it again. Falcons with that one game advantage, but we do have two groups. Group A might be a little bit locked in, so it is what it is. But Baldingos, welcome again to you, my friend. Again, how are you feeling? It's a Monday night. We just got off the weekend. Are we feeling good?
You know what? I had a pretty bloody amazing weekend, so I'm feeling great. And when I saw the call to come cast, I was first to pick up the phone. So I'm
Wonderful.
very excited for these matches tonight. It has been a while since I've been here on the VAD, not in league, but here on for the Victoris stream. I think the last time I was here was when we had a surprising 3-0 night from the Vipers.
Yes.
Back in like week.
I think it was week 4.
It was a while ago,
Yep.
but nonetheless, we're here again. I'm excited to see what we've got tonight. A lot of good players out on the stage, a lot of good teams ready to brawl it out. So we're getting ready to rock and roll here.
Yeah, and both of you were here for some big, impressive weeks. This one, again, could have the most fireworks. We have some ties to break. And again, Group A is the place where one of those ties is. All the teams are locked in for Group A for our standings. We'll just go over them real quick before we get into the analysis for our games. Group A, Astronauts in the lead convincingly. It says 18-2. I think that's just been updated because there might have been some FFs. I'm not entirely certain because I looked at it 5 minutes ago and it said 16-2. Either way, they cannot be caught today, right? Even if Bandits or Razorbacks go 3-0, Astronauts still have the advantage. They are locked into first seed no matter what. Bandits and Razorbacks, they are tied on the day. They will each play. They do have a match against each other. Unfortunately, it's not getting streamed. And if all goes up to chalk, that should be the tiebreaker match between them. Whoever wins it will get that second seed in the group. The other will get third seed. Hammerheads locked in at the fourth seed. Lions and Sharks, unfortunately, they have been eliminated. Now, over in Group B, that's where things get exciting. Crusaders at 14-4. They can technically be caught by Vipers if Vipers go 3-0, but Crusaders, unfortunately, have the head-to-head. Vipers are the only team in Group B to have beaten Crusaders, so that is notable. Otherwise, we have Falcons, Dragons, and Unicorns. Again, they're right there in the little kerfuffle. Rattlers, unfortunately, eliminated. But, again, there is still a World Slayer where we get that three-way tie. And in our first matchup of the night, Dragons, they have a big task ahead of them, taking on the Crusaders, taking on the first seed in the group. If they can get a win there, they might be able to overtake the Falcons and the Unicorns. If not, it makes things a whole lot murkier for them.
Yeah, it's the finest type of League of Legends action you can ask for at Victoris. I mean, your back is against the wall. Teams that prove themselves and can make a playoff push, this is where they have to perform. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And Dragons are right up to bat. I remember back to the last time I was on week 5, Dragons actually, I believe, barely slipped out of a win in against Cross bracket play. No, they slipped. They grabbed a win with cross bracket play that a lot of people thought they might choke away. So the fact that they could pull a big win up like that and now be back in here, it shows me that not only can they perform under pressure in a singular game sense, but hopefully can perform under pressure in the entirety of Group B.
Yeah, that's the whole thing for them. They have probably the hardest schedule today out of Dragons, Falcons, Unicorns. I believe Rattlers have FF'd their games, or at least maybe their games against Dragons, because Dragons now are recorded at 9 wins, when again, 5 minutes ago they were recorded at 8. So again, I literally just did my prep and now it is slightly goofed. So, it is what it is. I had talking points that I don't know if they're true anymore, but that is all right, because again, Dragons have to play Crusaders and Vipers today. Rattlers, I'm not gonna, it's again, I think they FF. I think they already got that win chalked up. So
yes, I can confirm, Thunder, in the Discord we have confirmed the Rattlers did FF that game.
Okay, so there we go, locked in. But One thing I do want to come to you about this. We talked about Dragons. They are a little scrappy, but of Falcons, Dragons, Unicorns, one of them is getting eliminated. Like, even if we have to go to a tiebreaker situation, or if we end up with two with the same record, their head-to-head will eliminate one of them. One of these three teams is not getting out. It's anybody's game. Dragons have the hardest schedule, but they've looked pretty decent. Who do we think is getting eliminated out of Group B, essentially between Falcons, Dragons, Unicorns?
Well, I definitely would like to come back to, I think, as you said, it was week 4. Dragons did go up against Crusaders, and we saw that it was definitely a tough match for them. And while they did play their hearts out, they didn't manage to pull things through. And I think that you said it perfectly. They have the toughest schedule here out of these 3 teams. But that is not to say that I think to your credit again, you mentioned they can play under pressure. And so when we take all that into account, they could theoretically pull off the miracle win here, the upset. And I think if they can do that, that does spell some pretty rough fates for our friends over at the Falcons and the Unicorns. And if I really had to put my thumb on it, I would probably, in a vacuum, say that I would say that
It's hard, isn't it?
It's so tough. It's so tough to pick.
It is hard. I would say that as of right now, the Unicorns are probably the underdogs in this scenario. I would say that Falcons, with their performance so far, are looking a little more impressive in my eyes. And so I think, in my humble opinion, that Unicorns are going to be the ones battling it out here, and they may not make it home tonight. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, we will have to see. Of course, we do have Unicorns at the end of the night. Like, that's going to be our final game, is Unicorns versus Vipers, which there's a world where Unicorns are already eliminated at that point. Like, if they lose their first 2 games and Dragons get this win against Crusaders, then I think that just, and depending on how Falcons do, I think that might just confirm Unicorns are out. But again, Unicorns, they have the chance at the very end of the night to show us that fire, show us a little bit of an exciting game and try to bring it to that tie, or try to potentially lock out Falcons or Dragons. So we'll have to see. But Slay, I do want to ask you the same question as well. We're not going to see Falcons tonight. They're the one of the 3 teams on here that we're not streaming, because we do want to get one of those Group A streams going in. But who are we thinking? Are we a little bit on the Unicorn downers? Are we on the Unicorn hype train? Where are we?
It's interesting, right? Because I like to look for parries in schedule when you talk about things. And one of the biggest things for me is momentum. It doesn't matter what sort of competitive environment you're talking about. I think momentum will always play a factor. And when you look at back the couple week 6 and, into week 5 even, you can see that the Falcons have actually kind of been building up a couple of clutch wins. They're actually coming off back-to-back wins to end off week 6. So I like the Falcons a lot. I might actually go with Baldingos here for the most niche reason possible against the Unicorns. The Unicorns haven't won a final match of the day since week 3. So they're terrible at closing out their weeks. And if we're talking about the Unicorns playing a potentially playoff clinching game in the closeout of week 7, the signs of the universe say that they are not too good in that scenario. So I'm going to use that because it's so hard to guess which one of these teams that have been neck and neck all season long might get eliminated. I'll use that in the universe and maybe fate to decide that the Unicorns are my team out, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that is, consistency is key. Having those struggles towards the end of the day can always be difficult. And again, if you're any of these teams, you cannot afford to drop a match in this last sequence. So I will say we have a few minutes before we're going to be getting into draft. And again, this will be our Dragons versus Crusaders matchup. A little bit of David versus Goliath, although it's the Dragon trying to slay the knight in this one, which also is not David versus Goliath, but you understand what I'm saying. So overall, we got a pretty fire matchup. Again, playoff implications, yada, yada, yada. What are we looking at? We have, again, Crusaders, they've looked fairly unbeatable. The only team in their group has been Vipers that have been able to take them down, and I think a lot of that came from kind of the jungle pressure that we saw out of Vipers. It went pretty well for them. So if you're Dragons, is that where you attack? Do you try to attack that mid lane a little bit more? What are we looking at for Dragons to try to duplicate Viper's success against the Crusaders last week?
Well, Thunder, I would certainly argue that the best thing to do here is to keep it a bit simple when it comes to targeting early game pressure. I think when we've seen Crusaders falter, a lot of the time it's they get caught in the early game, a place that they've had a lot of strength. I mean, there's a reason why they're 14 wins. If they get an early lead, they usually don't choke it. So you're gonna have to attack them very, very early on. But that's easier said than done if you don't prioritize one of these lanes. I would argue that the Crusaders have a pretty solid bottom lane combination with Wolven Alchemist and OG Sauce Boss. So maybe targeting Lindblom if he goes for maybe a more carry-oriented top laner we've seen a couple of times. And Darwin Theory also can pick some of those more immobile control mages, which are also just so high priority in the meta right now. If you can target and take away one of those lanes, get an early lead, that's honestly the best key to success for me for the Dragons to pick up a very big win.
Right. So, Boldingos, I'll turn this to you now. If we're trying to get that pressure, if we're trying to, focus on those positions, focus on those lanes, what picks are we expecting to see? Are we expecting, what picks would players want for that? And also, what are your key picks for the matches tonight? Again, we're off of the Worlds patch. We're starting to get into the preseason craziness. Blitzcrank Jungle is probably actually good these days. So what are we looking at? What are our pressure points here?
Well, my pressure point is that I never want to see a Blitzcrank jungle in my life. I'll probably uninstall the game at that point. But that's
I'm not kidding. There was a cast last week that I was on where Blitzcrank Jungle probably would have won the game. That's all I'm saying. Ooh. So don't down talk the crank, all right?
I'm not down talking the crank. It's already such a pain, jungle main as myself. I venture into other lanes and Blitzcrank is the bane of my existence. I don't need to see him in my jungle, okay? But regardless, I think if we are looking for these picks, I know Hecarim nowadays, very strong champion, always been good as a frontliner, as a diver, as heck, somebody who does damage even. And I think in this scenario, if we are looking for picks onto these immobile mages, I know Darwin is very inclined to pick Syndra, who I believe not too long ago did go a little bit of a rework, but that is not that it doesn't change the fact that she is still kind of an easy target for anyone big and fast enough to get her. But in the scenario that he ends up picking a Silas, which I know he has in this series a little bit, I think in that scenario, you would definitely be forced to probably not only be picking in your jungle, but probably in your lanes as well, looking for champions who can probably CC lock and also don't have ultimates that are particularly devastating for him to steal. But then again, you are sacrificing then the power from your own team. And then if we're talking for the bot lane, assuming our friends on the side of the Dragons go for that carry-oriented lane that you said, I think a lot of it, we might see still some assassin play, perhaps. But I also find that nowadays, in this current meta that we're in, that assassins are good for their one job, which is blowing up these carries, blowing up these pretty squishy champions. But then they're left against these absolute behemoths like Aatrox, like Maokai, all these huge sustained tanks that are just impossible to take down. So to summarize, I think if Dragons want to take out the side of the Crusaders, they're definitely going to have to play probably one of a composition where we can have some chain CC, some fairly solid frontline, and also damage not only against squishy targets but against tanks, because it's of no secret that that is where the state of the game is right now.
So you're telling me, all right. So you're telling me you need a pretty tanky champion that can shred through other tanks and can get pretty good access to the backline.
Yes.
It sounds like to me, and Slayer, I want your opinion on this. It sounds like to me that that's an Illaoi angle. Am I wrong?
Wow. I don't know how easy. I don't know if I would say Illaoi has easy access to the backline. I think she just blows up everybody in front of her with Leap of Faith if she can grab one of those possessions. And then, the backline's
in front of her.
Yeah, I fair enough. I do think Illaoi does fit a lot of those criteria, and she certainly is the kind of one of those Giga Chad picks where it's just like, I'm gonna pick this, and I'm either gonna int and be completely useless, or I'm gonna be literally unkillable 1 versus 3 in side lanes, and you guys can just win the game without me. So that would certainly be an intriguing pick. Talking about some other picks that are still very popular. I know we are off of Worlds patch, but there are still strong picks that we are seeing as the group stage of the Worlds tournament closed out. I still think Azir and Victor are kings of the mid lane currently right now. I think Syndra could be an interesting pick with her new major tweaks to her kit that allow her to scale up a lot better. I've seen a lot of Syndras being
2.0,
picked.
if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Vanguard 2.0. So mid lane, it's still kind of the age of the control mage right now. And I did not try to rhyme that one bit. That just came out as a rhyme right out the gate. So I would definitely be looking to see how does the adaptation come from these mid laners across the entire week. I think Silas, Baldingos, you brought up Silas, is a great pick. I always think Silas is such a great counter to a lot of the things control mages want to get done, because he not only can steal away those ultimates, but he can roam so well, and it really puts pressure on these control mage mid lane players who are thinking, oh, okay, I just want to farm the entire time, but then they have a Silas come back to lane that's 3-0-1 because he nuked your bot lane 7 times already.
We'll have to see. I guess one other question. I talked about the allowed kind of jokingly, but a little bit more seriously, we're still talking about very powerful picks and something else that we have seen at Worlds that maybe it's because these are players playing at Worlds and they're some of the best in the world, but we've seen an answer into these kind of mid lane control mages be Akali, which has proven very successful in the hands of like Zeka and Xiaohu, because they're Zeka and Xiaohu, but these two players, you mentioned it, they're a little bit more control mage focused. Baldingo, do you think maybe that one of them moving to the Akali pick to try to pressure out their kind of control mage brethren might be something that we could see, or just really any assassin in general might be something to keep an eye out on for?
That's a good question, Thunder, because while I wouldn't exactly count it out, I also don't know if I've really seen a lot of Akali from these players in this series. And it was a conversation that I had not too long ago over on another stream, that there is the ideal pick, the meta pick, and then there is the comfort pick, the pick that you can perform on.
Right.
And so ultimately, what the conclusion that I came to is that in the right scenarios, a comfort pick will win every time. In that you can focus more on your macro play, which at this level is so imperative for the success of a team. And you can stop worrying about how your champion is functioning and stop thinking about what you're doing, really. But if you pick that meta pick, maybe if you can hand off that macro to somebody on your team, if you can sit there and listen to calls and essentially have somebody co-pilot you to some degree, then I think the meta pick does come through when you can focus on that champion while having somebody help you move around the map and things of that nature. So I guess if I had to say it, I don't think we'll see an Akali this evening.
Yeah. It is one of those champions that requires the hands. The macro play is important, but for Akali, you kind of have to put on the carry pants. So also just a brief update. We are vamping. We are stalling for time a little bit. The Dragons mid laner is having some connectivity issues, and we do also have a sub top laner for Crusaders. Boat Chicken is going to be coming in for Lindblom. Boat Chicken, I think, has played like 3 or 4 roles for the side of Crusaders now, but has always been fairly consistent, I think, across the board. So I don't really think that changes too much. We'll have to see if we get more information on OTFF. So that being said, we're still, hold on. Actually, looks like we're getting a sub in as well for the Dragons. Zolo Bomber is coming in. So we do have some subs coming in. I guess this is a fair time to talk about something that, we're week 7 of a draft league. These teams have been playing together now for 7 weeks. They've been playing 3 games a day, not matches. My bad. We're not playing best of 3s. We're playing best of 1s. That would take 10 years to do every Monday night. But there's been a good chance for people to develop those macro skills, to develop kind of those synergies. And so you can point out, all right, hey, you're decent on this pick. I'll tell you where to go. If you're playing Karthus jungle, I'll tell you when to press R if you don't know when to do it, or stuff like that, right? So for something to keep an eye out on, I think we are seeing some of those team compositions come in, but we're now seeing those subs come through. So maybe what I'm about to say just doesn't really matter. But overall, Slayer, I kind of want to ask you this. You've been looking at it. Crusaders, they've been losing more as the weeks have gone on. Dragons, do you think that they've been able to put together the synergies now with that kind of macro concept, that macro play, to finally beat the team that has overall just shown to have better hands?
Yeah, that's a great question to bring up, Thunder. I do think the Dragons have finally established a bit of an identity towards the latter stages of VAD. It seems like the Dragons like to play for those more scaling team fight based compositions. That's with a week 5, the win we saw from them was mainly because they just, even though they went down early against their opponent, I can't remember off the top of the head who they played, but they outscaled them as the game went on. That game pushed about 35 minutes plus. So I think that might be their identity. But I do want to quickly touch on the fact that when you're talking about subs coming in, I do want to say that plugging a sub into the top lane, I think, is much, much easier than plugging into a sub to the mid lane. So obviously, we have already have seen a ton of Boat Chicken, like you mentioned. I don't know how much. I don't think we've seen too much of Zolo Bomber. But when you plug in a top laner, right, you can kind of just allocate them to maybe one safe comfort top lane pick. You know, you talk about maybe your Ornn that sits back and waits to play for team fights they're comfortable on, or even, you know, scaled back Ornn known as Malphite. Your big tanks up there that you just can let sit back, and their job is just to farm and not lose their lane. But mid lane is probably the second most dynamic play, you know, lane in the game. So it's much harder to just plug and play there, to be honest.
Now, that is true. Notably, again, you know what? Maybe we'll just say we might want to disregard all notifications from Dragons, at least for a little bit. OTFF is apparently back, so
they're all out the window.
We might be out the window. But that being said, since OTFF is back in the lobby, Baldingo, I was going to give you a chance to speak, but now instead, I'm going to hand it off to the both of you to take us into draft for game number 1. Also, boys, make sure you give your predictions before you go to break. But I will see you on the other side. Have a blast.
Thank you very much, Thunder, and we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, we'll see you on the other side, Thunder. We get into draft now, Baldingos. I know you didn't get to make that final point, so I'll let you take the opening point here as we finally get into picks and bans. Are there any specific champions you expect either one of these teams to just immediately boot out the gate?
Well, I know that Darwin, as I said earlier, Darwin Silas has been an absolute menace during this group stage. So it wouldn't surprise me here if the Dragons took him out of rotation. And we mentioned it before, it's a very flexible champion that overall isn't a terrible ban. You know, it's not unlike banning, let's say, I don't know, you know, you ban maybe a brand, and that is an Udyr.
Udyr.
Okay. And if I recall correctly, that Udyr rework came in kind of in the middle of the VAD. So interesting to see that the Dragons are already taking that out of rotation. I don't believe that Crusaders have been working too heavily in the side of Udyr, but I'm guessing in this scenario that they're just not looking to you know, deal with anything. Maybe a little overtuned champion on right release. It's tradition. It's unavoidable. But I do believe that that is a tenet of development. But that's besides the point. And now we see the Vayne come out from Crusaders. I know you discussed earlier the Dragon scaling composition, which I'd actually kind of want to bring up and discuss, because while you mentioned that, Crusaders have tended to move towards a bit earlier game comps. And I know Woven and Sauce Boss both have that incredible synergy with the Misfortune of Mumu, which has been terrorizing every level of play from Gold all the way to Worlds even, where I believe Amumu and Misfortune occupy the bottom 2 top pick and bans in the competition. And so, you know, in the event that Crusaders do ban out a lot of these scaling champions, do you think Dragons are going to switch things up here and maybe try and meet Crusaders on this early game composition?
Yeah, it's a really intriguing point of all things, because it's kind of the push and pull, right? Who will really mend to the other side's comp? I will say I do know for a fact that the Vayne ban is a bit of a respect ban to Melee Vayne. Every time I've seen a team play versus Dragons, that is one of his pocket picks that he loves to go to, so it's kind of a respect ban to go over. But it does speak to what you were talking about, the scaling comps. And it is intriguing, right? Because when we keep going through bans here, as I believe the stream draft is a little bit behind, actually. It's stuck. But I can, you know, tell you, oh, there we go. They caught up exactly on time there. You can see the Crusaders, they're banning out champions that you would consider late game scaling champions. Yes, Master Yi, as much of a meme as he is, he does scale to play for the late game. And Fiddlesticks is all about active early gank pressure once grabbing ultimate, and that's a bad way for the Crusaders. I think they're they're just backing up your point very well, Baldingos. And it looks like out the gate, the Dragons are going to stick with a mix of both of those topics, right? Because I would say Draven's a lane bully in a lot of senses, but also if he gets rolling, he is a late game prowess himself as well.
Late game prowess indeed. I really hope that my feed is going to fix itself here in a moment, but we'll see. Apologies to the viewers if this looks like it does on my screen. But
spooky season. You're with the times.
Spooky season, right. If somebody starts crawling out of your screen, run, don't look back, and trip the person closest to you. And and I'm surprised the Crusaders would sub out the Misfortune here, because as I mentioned earlier, Woven and OG Sauce Boss on the Misfortune of Mumu bot lane have been pretty dominant down there. So to see them sort of disregard that pick, I think is, again, what you might say is a respect pick in a sense. They do, I think, not have first pick here, even though I know we understand the idea of picking and swapping. And then we'll see Caitlyn Lux for the side of Crusaders, which could get pretty ugly pretty quickly, if I'm not going to lie, for the Dragons on the bot lane. I mean, you talk about early game. Nothing feels more early game than a level 2 Lux route into a Caitlyn bear trap that just leaves you with barely any health after a headshot. So I don't. There we go. We're back.
Hey.
So I don't think Crusaders are going to stray very far from their usual early game pressure with a little bit of late game sprinkled in there from Darwin. And as we roll on to the last pick of the Dragons, there might be a Hecarim that I was talking about. And yes, there is. So that looks like it's going to be in a Mumu Draven bot lane. Interesting pick there from the Dragons. I don't recall Hoodie's experience with Draven. If it is something that they're comfortable with, I'll be very interested to see that, because, I mean, you talked about it earlier. Draven is an early game bully in the right hands and then a late game menace as well. And so as we roll into Darwin's pick here, which is the Maokai, maybe a swap around here. Slayer, what are your thoughts here? Just looking at our first 3 picks. We've got what we discussed in Crusaders early game, and we've got Dragons kind of going the same way as well. So then at this rate, what do you think this game will come down to?
It's very interesting. I think it will come down to how the junglers define how, so far, their bot lanes have reflected oppositely in a way. Because, yeah, sure, Draven and Mumu can be aggressive very early on, but the most aggressive bot lane of the current meta, I would say, right now is Caitlyn Lux. With it, just you keep them at bay from such a far distance, and you can, like you said, line up so many great traps and snares with the two combined. That's a very early game aggressive bottom lane. But then you go to the jungle, and you would favor the Hecarim in early game pathing and ganking versus a Maokai as powerful as he is. So you're going to see Ishan and Becky here. They're going to be playing kind of opposite what the bottom lane wants to do, and I think we're going to have to see what these solo lane picks look like to reflect on the overall team comp going forward. The big takeaway, though, is they're kind of already morphing their identity as we do get through the second phase of bans. You're going to see, I believe, Xerath and Mordekaiser are taken away for the Dragons, and Silas is banned away by the Crusaders, and along with the Ornn pick. So it's very 2 intriguing bans, all targeting the solo laners, and that's a call your shot pick, Baldingos, if the Fiora gets locked in for Boat Chicken.
Yeah, call your shots is kind of an understatement. Oh, never mind.
I do not like Renekton still. Are you a Renekton fan? Because I think it's
now
just a
what do you
pick.
mean? Now, what do you mean by Renekton? Are you saying, do I like the idea here in the scenario? Do I like the champion? Give me a little clarification.
So in this scenario, yeah, you could tell it, but every time I see a Renekton picked, no matter what level it is, they look like the amazing aggressive top lane bully you talk about, and then their damage just falls off a cliff, and they seem useless in team fights. Is that what you see every single game for Renekton, or am I just talking nonsense?
Honestly, after seeing Renekton kind of get hit with the nerf hammer over and over again, I might actually second that notion, Slayer. He has definitely seen better days, but regardless, I think in the right hands, it's still a very powerful champion. As you say again, this is not a game that Crusaders are going to want to drag on here, especially in the presence of a Draven and a Hecarim even. And now as we see the final picks for the Dragons, there's also the Syndra to be worried about. And it's kind of funny, Slayer. It's almost like Crusaders and Dragons have swapped places. Or, Crusaders banning the Silas and then Dragons picking the Syndra. It's definitely some strange parallel universe we live in. But after seeing the Morgana pick, I'm almost wondering if that's going to be a Lux mid.
Yeah.
Which, if that's the case, then this bot lane for the Dragons has become even more of a nightmare as you get hit with an ability that, according to the Riot devs, if you hover over the status effect, lasts about 1,000 years in terms of the brute. So, interesting. There's that what is it? The off-brand Ornn pick in that Malphite for Hoffman in the top lane. And so when I look at this, my immediate knee-jerk reaction is Dragons are looking for team fights. I think that's definitely where their head's at. And when we also take into account the Hecarim, that keeps our lane pressure in a decent place as well for the side of the Dragons. You mentioned it. It's a very strong champion that has a lot of mobility, good pathing. It's somebody who can make laning phase definitely not fun for anyone involved. And then when I search over to Crusaders, I mean, Lux doesn't have terrible roaming, but it could be better. In terms of the Maokai, I wouldn't really classify him as the strongest ganking jungler. I find that he's probably there to keep Zolo Bomber on their feet in order to make sure that they don't get, the Hecarim flying out of nowhere when we'll see Boat Chicken sitting on the top lane and he'll see the sapling pop in the bush and he'll think, all right, time to fall back. But then that does bring into the question here how Darwin and Woven are going to be moving, as well as Sauce Boss, because I find that Maokai definitely not strong in an early 1v1 in the jungle, especially if you're going against a champion like Hecarim, who already has so much damage, so much sustain, maybe even in the Conqueror rune set. I think if this Maokai is going to be at its full efficacy, it requires participation from the whole team, which is something that Crusaders are definitely good at. And then on the side of Dragons, it's going to have to be the same thing. I mean, while theoretically Zolo Bomber could maneuver fast enough and maybe even split the jungle, heaven forbid, with their lane opponent, I mean, it's gonna be a rough time for Dragons here, assuming Crusaders are going to be playing hard into this jungle.
Yeah. There's a lot of avenues where I think things are going to get hard for the Dragons. But I do want to point out, we talk about the Hecarim here for Zolo Bomber, and you have a couple lanes where, where would you send the Hecarim first, right? For those early ganks. I think regardless of if it's a Lux or a Morgana mid, and I can confirm that on the client side, thanks to our amazing production, that is going to be Darwin on the Lux. Lux, not very mobile at all. And Morgana, not very, wouldn't be much better. She has the spell shield to protect her from a Hecarim, but I would expect Zolo Bomber to be trying to get Ishan ahead on this new look Syndra that Thunder aptly called Veigar 2.0 in a lot of ways is currently, just with, maybe a little more skill involved than the tiny Yordle Mad Hatter. So I think the jungle will go that way very intriguingly for the Dragons. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. But this top lane matchup is one that I think you've seen for probably... It's funny, I haven't seen it in a while, but it used to be a staple of, oh my God, what seasons I swear, for like the solid middle of the seasons of League, you could see Renekton Malphites brawling it out constantly. I think when it comes down to it, though, what the main factors for the early game are going to be is, can Zolo Bomber be effective across the map for the Dragons, and can this very aggressive bot lane of Caitlyn Morgana, who still have that range capability, just a little less damage compared to the Lux, get an advantage over the Amumu Draven. But that sets us up for some predictions, Baldingos, before we hop into game one. So you laid out a lot of great points about how either of these comps are going to operate. Who are you going to back here? Are you going to take the Dragons to get a huge upset win to help push them to a playoff spot in the VAD, or are the Crusaders going to stamp 15-4 on their record to start out week 7?
Well, you make a convincing argument there right at the end. Crusaders already at 14-4, and Absolute Menace have already taken Dragons down in the past. But if I were to put this game in a vacuum and looking at the team comps, looking at the synergies we're seeing, I would probably have to give it back to the Crusaders again, because they already exercise such powerful map control that I don't even think the mobility of a Hecarim can withstand, as well as, you know, even a very well-rounded top laner would struggle in that scenario. And so I think with that Maokai jungle emphasizing the need for even more map control, I think it's just going to exaggerate what they're good at, and it'll bring them good places for this match.
I like where your head's at, Baldingos. I'm going to back you as well. We're going to either cast or curse the Crusaders, or be completely right for game number 1. And my reasoning, though, really quickly, is if you look at the Dragons comp, the only AD damage post maybe like 15 minutes, unless Zolo Bomber is stupidly fed on Hecarim, is going to be Draven. And I think that the Crusaders, as resolved as they are going to find a way to take this Draven out. You get rid of the Draven and you itemize correctly for the other AP behind that team, they are not going to be able to win a single fight whatsoever. So I will back Crusaders as well. But to find out if the Crusaders can punch their 15th win on the season of VAD, we're going to go to a quick break. On the other side, me and Baldingos have you covered for game number 1 between Dragons and Crusaders.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here we are in game 1 of tonight's final week of the group stage. Dragons versus Crusaders. We're running into the Summoner's Rift with 5 of the Crusaders, I believe, rolling down to the bot lane. Might we see an invade here? Oh, this could get very nasty very quickly.
Oh boy, yeah. The Crusaders are, or the Dragons, excuse me. I always get switched up because the Dragons are now red, the color red, but they're on the blue side. The Dragons are setting up defensively for this very, very well in what's got to be the most off-brand counter invade spot I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen a team pick this brush to counter invade, but it looks like the Crusaders might actually avoid this. If they're able to, yeah, they're expecting the Dragons to now be invading because they're just gonna path right on out. So that looks like it could be complete chaos Baldingos, but it is completely avoided, and all the teams are just gonna reset back to pretty normal starts.
Yep, normal start coming in from the bot lane for the side of Crusaders, as well as the Dragons. And we mentioned earlier the need for movement on the side of Dragons and matching this. And I think already that this is going to bode well for them. Starting on the same side will allow maybe an early 1v1 for the Dragons. And I think in the scenario that happens, that Zola Bomber, if they can get a kill off on the jungler in the Crusaders team, I think that will be a huge win and a huge early lead that they'll be able to capitalize on. As we watch a little bit of trading happen in the top lane, nothing's changed. After so many years, it is still a brawl up there for the top lane.
Yeah, it's just absolutely, it's a slap fest between those two, right? They just throw hands constantly back and forth there, but it, you know, with us getting into the early game here, it does allow us to get a look somewhat at some of the runes and summoner choices. Those two in the top lane get pretty low health. There's a good snare coming across for Darwin onto that Syndra. Are there any Baldingos before action hopefully kicks off that really stand out to you that you didn't expect from any of these players?
If we are going to discuss rune pages, looks like we won't get a chance because First Blood for Crusaders comes in. The Renekton diving in and absolutely slashing the Malphite to pieces like he is but a sugar rock and not a mountain. But when we talk about runes that I wasn't expecting, as it stands, there's nothing too crazy. I mean, First Strike on the Lux is nothing... I mean, it's unconventional, but it's not unexpected. And you know, we see First Strike on a lot of poke mages, similar to our friends in the Dragons. We're also running the first Strike on the Syndra, and might even see a little bit more damage. But otherwise, now the heal on the Lux for Darwin. Yeah. That's quite interesting. He does have his flash on F, which immediately, doesn't even matter. Gank coming in from the bot lane early for the side of Dragons. We'll see some damage roll in. And a flash burn, but nothing becomes of it. As at the same time, wow, gank is happening on the top lane. And, ooh, excellent knockback there.
Yeah, so the Malphite is able to avoid the original onslaught there from Becky, and it's not enough. There's actually 2 ultimates on the side of Dragons that do start with Unstoppable, so not going to stop using that word with Unstoppable Onslaught and Onslaught of Shadows going down for both those, but Ultimate's not online just yet, as this Draven Amumu lane is going to land another nice hook, but a good spell shield comes across from OG Sauce Boss, so it's just a bit of harass as another beautiful snare lands for Darwin. He's able to also step away from Spare of the Week and forces the flash for flash trade back to the bottom lane of Mumu. Another bandage toss onto this Caitlyn. Low health bars across Summoner's Rift, but somehow no kills have come across. We're still stuck at such an even scoreline.
You know, I didn't realize it till just now, Slayer. But what I realized, what I have just recognized in this bot lane is the fact that the Amumu with the double rag toss could spell disaster for Sauce Boss here by virtue of the fact that the spell shield's only good for 1 piece of CC, and there are 3 abilities that have hard CC against them. in the bot lane, and not to mention the Hecarim ganks that could come in. You said it yourself. You can protect yourself once, but after that, you're dead in the water. And with the amount of CC present in this bot lane, I think the Dragons have actually had a solid pick here. Surprising to see the Crusaders actually didn't ban the Amumu after not picking him in the first place.
Yeah, you're starting to see why that R2 Amu has come out here. The comfort pick, it seems like, for Team Wild, who has been, like you mentioned, landing bandage tosses left, right, and center. But, I do want to bring up Wild Dingo, a point we discussed constantly in the draft, which was this jungle matchup between Zolo Bomber and Becky Rita. We expect the Hecarim to be a lot more active and, has ganked just about as many times as his Maokai, but is also down in CS just a bit. Not exactly the start you would expect for such an early game-oriented jungler.
No, not the start at all. However, I also think that we have yet to see how they're going to capitalize, because I think not only does this come off the early game, but it comes off of how the Dragons are going to react to the movement from the Maokai, similar to the movement happening up here in the mid lane, as it seems we might get a river fight here in a second.
Yeah, pings coming out all across the board. These junglers are pathing back down. I believe that is also Ishan, who came off of his mid lane to try and path towards his dragon. Is down on Summoner's Rift, which, obviously Dragons all important for stacking, but a couple patches ago now got buffed with their single target stats, which makes them all of the more appetizing for teams to go after. As we do also get a look here at Zolo Bomber. He's going to clear out a very, very vital ward there. And it looks like we're moving on over to a potential 4v4 towards this bot lane. The Crusaders have the first move, and they're not going to go over the Dragon. They're not going for Cloud Drake. They're going for an invade onto Zolo Bomber, and he has no idea. Snare lands across for Darwin, and Becky steps right in to slay the Hecarim. You'll also likely steal away this red buff, but such a smart invade to grab a kill back, another kill up for the Crusaders.
Not a bad play at all. Excellent use there of the distraction. I almost want to say that Zolo Bomber may have been thinking that they were just, or may have been intending to give the Dragon there, thinking that the Crusaders were going to move for it. But then they came in and they took him out, and what is it? The Crusaders put is that their first kill on the board? I can't see very well, I must confess.
That is their the second kill, the solo kill up top for Boat Chicken as well, who we do see get a nice stun combination out onto Hoodie Man, but he's going to back up under turret. Ultimates are starting to come online for a lot of these teams, as the Cloud Drake is actually picked up on the back end by Becky Rita. And I think that just means we're about to get some serious fireworks for what's been a pretty tame early game with some of these ultimates.
And I think that, I say again, the part of this early game, it is quiet, but I think that's because Crusaders have ultimately not made these massive moves that we're used to seeing from them, because Dragons are playing very patiently, unlike the patience here on the bot lane. As the Amumu rolls in, doing absolutely massive damage. A beautiful... Oh, I don't remember what that ultimate is called.
Curse of the Sad Mummy, but it's traded right back by Wolven Alchemist, who actually flashes forward. He's trying to set up Ace in the whole damage on to Melee Vayne, but it doesn't get enough. Key that was a 1-for-1, but with those admiration stacks on the Draven, it's so vital that he was able to pick up that kill with Whirling Death. So it's the first kill on the board for Dragons, and Balding, as we talked about, Melee Vayne has to be that AD hyper carry on this squad if they want to win. Very vital he got that kill in the bottom lane.
This is true. And as we creep up here into the next couple minutes of the match, I do believe that our friends at the Dragons secured themselves a Rift Herald, going to be very important if we are going to shut down these roams that we're seeing from the mid laners. And if I would put it right now, I think the Dragons are doing a very good job matching the pressure that Crusaders has been showing them. And you saw earlier, right, a Zolo Bomber clearing the ward. That's exactly what Dragons are going to need to win this game. I mean, Maokai by himself, but it's irrelevant to fight in the mid lane.
Yep, and it is gonna be a pickup for the Hecarim there, Zolo Bomber, but now he's surrounded by the entirety of the Crusader army. Exhaust gonna drop down onto the horse, and he's able to get his E off, but a nice grab by Becky will give this Maokai his second kill. So it's another 1-for-1 trade, but you're starting to get to the point here, Baldingos, where you don't want this Maokai taking up a majority of your kills. Now it's 2 of them in a bounty for the Crusaders.
Yeah, not the champ you want your bounties on, especially if they're going to be frontlining like Becky Rita is. And I'd also point out here that oh wow.
Double dash and slash. Boat Chicken takes down Ishan, and we go to the bottom lane where Nature's Grasp is trying to pick off this Amumu. There's 3 members on top of the Sad Mummy, but do they have enough damage? They do. Woven Alchemist grabs another shutdown. 2 lanes, 2 kills for the Crusaders, who continue to cruise along in this matchup. Oh, and there's another Dark Binding actually landed on to the Draven. Ace in the hole is going to be canceled, though, by Zolo Bomber. Key knockaway made sure that Caitlyn couldn't take down Melee Vayne, and now all they can do is pray that they step out of line under turret, but it's a beautiful save from Dragon's jungler.
I mean, after that series of events, Slayer, things are starting to shake out, sort of how we expected. I mean, Becky Rita has been moving through this jungle, and, you know, surprisingly enough, exercising a lot more of that lane presence than Zolo has, and it's starting to show with a lot of ganks, resulting in 2 kills and an assist for them. And so when we, you know, put it into perspective, I think it's exactly as you said. The winner of this game currently, I think, is being determined by who's got the stronger jungle, and at the moment, it is the Crusaders. That is not to count Zolo Bomber out of this, however. They have been there when their team has needed them, and they have also been trading objectives well. Speaking of objectives, there's the Rift Herald that they traded earlier, and it will grab them a couple tower plates, hopefully, but it's not appear. We'll grab them about 2 as we'll roll back off here on the top lane. But as we move up here in the match, I'd also kind of want to point out how this Draven has been performing. I mean, look at it right now. Just absolutely annihilating his lane opponent. Just like that, a shutdown and 2 kills now to Melee Vayne's name. You wanted an AD carry, Slayer? They're right here. And they're even going to get another one. Actually going to get stolen away from Team Wild, but I think it's hardly a problem now. It doesn't hurt to give your support a little love, especially after all those adoration stacks. And, you know, I think build yourself a Lord Dominic's regards, and I think you got a good carry on your hands. But we do see, as pointed out by our wonderful backside, we have, or back end, excuse me, we do have Becky Rita on the Imperial mandates.
Yeah, very intriguing pick for this Maokai nonetheless, as we will get some jungle action rolling towards here as Becky Rita will actually... Wow, that was a bit of an early spot on Scuttle, but is able to pick it up. Scare of the Week will land, though, and Amumu lands a bandage toss. Immediately pops Nature's Grasp, but Becky Rita should be able to flee back towards his mid laner, and there's another beautiful combination from this Lux. That damage is starting to really come across with the Liamdries, and the Crusaders pick up another key fight around Dragon as it spawns.
Yep, and as we said, the Crusaders are still... you know, have a lot more of this map control, and I think they did very well there to separate the Dragons out and get that crucial pick, because immediately after that, I mean, falling into that player disadvantage, not to mention the health disadvantage with Melee Vayne taking a fair bit of health down before pulling out of that fight. And now that, as we see, I believe it is now an Infernal Soul for on the board, and Crusaders at just the Slayer, you want to do me a favor, read out the time?
You know, I wish I could. I'm having just as much trouble seeing the time, but it looks like Hecarim's not having as much trouble seeing this Lux, but there's a double binding into Final Spark. The Zanyas from Syndra can only delay the inevitable as Becky is rushing down Ishan, but he's able to actually back out comfortably. So a beautiful double snare comes across for Darwin, but it results in just about nothing on the scoreboard, but maybe a couple of extra turret autos.
Yeah, Darwin is probably seething right now. In the words of the Balfs, he cannot stand the Zanya's abuser in his lane, but nonetheless, he will move on, take these towers, as you're saying. And, you know, I was honestly expecting at this point, if there was going to be a huge sort of blowout lead, it was going to happen now. You know, the Crusaders would take things pretty early, and while they are ahead, I wouldn't say it's by the margin I expected, which, you know, really is playing to the Dragons' favor. I mean, I definitely am very impressed by this performance.
Ooh.
Oh, the Spare of the Sad Mummy. Woo!
Curse of the Sad Mummy lines up 2, and Zolo cleans up as well with Unstoppable Onslaught. What a beautiful ultimate combination, but here comes the response from the Crusaders, as that's a flash Unstoppable Force ultimate out from Malphite. The substitute stand-in is able to grab a very coveted save. Actually, that's not the substitute stand-in, but Boat Chicken is the substitute on the other side. Hoodie Man comfortably pulls his hood up and sends himself packing back to base in what was going to be a dire 2-man play on the top.
I mean, when we look at things right now, Dragons are doing exactly what they need to. They're getting the kills on the Draven and the Hecarim. And, you know, while that is your 2 AD-focused champions, I find that these are 2 champions that can run away with the game regardless of how much armor you build. I mean, Draven has this absurd kiting and damage output to the point where it doesn't matter if you have a GA. That GA is going to bring you back, and you're going to get instantly destroyed if you're Woven Alchemist. And we'll see another, I think, Spark come out in that mid lane, as well as Maokai. Wow, really getting ripped apart here.
Yeah, great bandage toss again from Team Wild. Sets up Zolo Bomber beautifully again, and they catch out Becky Rita at a perfect time here. They're able to take some more jungle control, and yeah, the Crusaders able to make a couple really good macro plays, but now it's starting to falter, getting picked off one by one across the map, it seems.
You said it. You said it just then, Slayer. They're getting picked off. I think Crusaders right now might be playing a little bit cocky at the moment. They're taking a lot of fights, or they're taking a lot of duels here, and it's not playing out to their favors. I think Dragons here, they're not recognizing, have a much stronger 1v1, 2v2 composition, and they're paying for it dearly, especially when we look at the Draven now. Finished their Kraken Slayer as well as a BF Sword and a Vampire Scepter. I mean, this is not the situation you want to be in if you're the Crusaders, especially considering how much early game damage that Draven still has. It's going to make team fighting a lot harder, and I think if Crusaders want... I mean, even in the event that Crusaders want to play for team fights, they still have a lot of challenges to go against with the Spectral... I'm not even going to try and biff that name. With the Hecarim ult, with the Amumu ult, all of these factors that play into it really just put them in a spot that is not ideal at all, if I must be frank. I mean, there's the bandage toss and the Mummy's Despair, and another kill for Melee Vayne, deleting the Caitlyn. Dragons could, at this rate, you know, I said Crusaders were ahead, but I'm not so sure anymore, considering how fed Melee Vayne is getting. You know, take away the Vayne, doesn't matter. Put him on the Noxian champion, and you suddenly have a recipe for a very spicy game if you're not careful.
Yeah, something we didn't get to touch on enough, it seems, about the Dragons comp is the two-man play between Zolo Bomber and Team Wild. And Amumu Hecarim brings so much crowd control to the table on their lonesome. And we might see some of it come out here. So there's another bandage toss landed, and it sets up for a beautiful Syndra ultimate. And look at Melee Vayne going forward into 4, and that's a critical shutdown given across the Woven Alchemist. Scout of the Week can only delay the Renekton, who's barreling down towards the Dragons. Pops ultimate, but won't be able to get on top of any of those squishy opponents. But for the 3rd time, they pick off a member of the Dragons right in front of the Dragon.
Yeah, definitely ironic. Oh, but this is ironic too. Hecarim comes in flying from the side, big damage.
Yeah, and there's final spark though from the response from Darwin is Unstoppable Force from the Malphite. That rock is nearly unmovable, and it's gonna be a trade kill. He can only save his teammates, so right when we think the Crusaders are out of it, they find 3 critical kills with Soul Point up for grabs.
But I wouldn't exactly say Crusaders have this dragon. Yeah, they are very low, and that Syndra, it's not doing great, but still has enough damage to cause problems if the side of the Crusaders aren't careful.
Ooh,
Was
forced to
that a
flash. Yeah, forced to flash away
God.
from Dark Binding, and it's just enough to zone away the cavalry from Dragons. It was actually Melee Vein. No, Melee Vein's still not up just yet, but a great job there. Valdingos is, oh, another final spark. Tried to snipe off the wave there from Melee Vein. Great job nonetheless by Crusaders to kind of poise themselves and put themselves for a real obvious win condition with those Drakes.
They do have the win condition, and honestly, I would definitely wonder what was kind of going through Melee Vein's head there. While they did have the position, they did have the damage. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. They did have the damage, and they're playing with sort of the right aggression I'd argue that a Draven needs to play with, but they were so dreadfully out of position. I mean, sitting in that lane next to the river, I think had they been with their team in sort of the safety of the crowd, they would have been able to apply the pressure they needed to and gotten the Crusaders off the dragon, which I think was the priority at that point, and not just securing the dragon. Because as we saw there, Melee Vein was really hungry for that kill, ran it down, and ended up just getting swamped by members of the Crusaders. And giving up a shutdown that is definitely nothing to scoff at, and to the ADC nonetheless, the one person or one of the many people on this team you don't want fed. So I think had the Dragons in that scenario played back a little safer, playing for pressure rather than for picks, they probably could have gotten that Drake, or at least had a fight that is more to their favor, especially considering that Zilla Bomber wasn't there, if I'm correct.
Yeah, Zolo Bomber was not present till late. He tried to flank around and shut down the first Drake and was promptly killed off. I'm actually curious, you talked about the itemization difference between Melee Vein and Wolven Alchemist here. I'm curious to see the gold, to see if Wolven, if we take a look at the gold graphs really quickly, or the gold difference, to see if Wolven, yeah, he's sitting on a good amount of gold. I was going to say, based on the itemization difference, I was curious after the shutdown if he was going to be able to catch up a bit with only the Gale Force and that cloak. But he will be on a very hardy back of about 17k, so he'll be able to get closer to 2 items. As the 2 brutes at the top lane, they're still not done just dueling. It's just a wet noodle fight up there.
Wet noodle fight, and even with the grievous wounds from Hoodie Max, I mean, both Chicken is still walks away pretty with almost more than half their health. And it's funny, Slayer, you know, there has been a lot of changes in the past couple months. 2 healing, 2 grievous wounds. And I honestly am a little confused by virtue of the fact that, you know, if we are trying to move away from the sustained comp, why then take down grievous wounds? I mean, you look at it, and Hoodie Max has already finished their full Thornmail before they even bothered with the Bammy Cinder. And I do think that is in part to the fact that base grievous wounds does almost nothing nowadays. Speaking of almost nothing.
Oh my gosh, that was just one. If the cleanse doesn't come across there from Melee Vein, he dies to the Lux of this powerful luck of Darwin Theory. He actually has to trade out the support, and the dive is going to come across now with the turret dropping. Nature's Grasp will grab onto 2. They're trying to find Melee Vein, and they do, and some extra on the back end of it. Zolo Bomber will also drop. They grab that first mid tower and one in the top lane. It's all up Crusaders right now.
Again, with Melee Vein taking that aggressive approach, and while in theory it could work, the situation here is not it. You have 2 people coming at you from the front, and your frontliner is very low at that. Maybe you have some vision in the jungle there to see the other 2 coming in from that red buff, and it leads Melee Vein in a bad situation that gets them killed again. And, you know, especially on a champion like Draven, where kills are costing you where deaths are costing you even more gold than your average champion. You know, I do wonder when Melee Vein might start playing back a little bit and keeping themselves up and alive, because right now I think Melee Vein really at this point is the only hope for the Dragons if they're going to stay in this, because Crusaders are pulling up a lot of momentum, similar to the momentum brought about by this Renekton diving into that top lane, but nothing will come of it. And, you know, you mentioned it earlier, right? That one of our teams here in the split is currently has a decent amount of momentum going. Momentum is so important, and in this scenario, you know, I think that the Crusaders currently have the momentum shifting to their favor, and the only stop to that is Melee Vein.
Yeah, Melee Vane's gonna have to come up huge. That Soul Secure Drake is on the cards, and it looks like Dragons aren't willing to give it up. Two-man curse the Sad Mummy on to the Morgana and Maokai, but Nature's Grasp creates enough distance for them both to get out. There's a beautiful snare and snipe. Darwin, are you kidding me? Melee Vane drops for the third time in a row without picking up a kill, and the go button is now pressed for the entirety of the Crusaders. That is Boat Chicken going forward, lands a beautiful double, slicing, stun, and kill. The carries are down for the entirety of Dragons, and that's going to be the soul secured for the 14-4 squad of Group B.
Yeah, I think that might does not spell well for the Dragons, Slayer. That was sort of their fight to win. They had most of everybody in the same space. The Crusaders were on the Dragon. They had the opportunity, but I mean, Darwin with, you know, that early snare and last spark just deletes one of the Dragons and leaves them in a very early disadvantage. And it seems that with that in mind, the Crusaders will actually take this new Dragon Soul that is just doing work, even on the camps. It's outrageous. And they're going to move on to Baron, but it seems that Dragons will respond in turn, moving to maybe steal it and or fight it out a little bit.
Yeah.
See where things go from here.
Watch out for Dar when he's on the flank, trying to line up another one of those beautiful snares. We're about to have the Syndra come back up. She does have teleports so she can join the fight, but they're burning this Baron down. It is locked down before anything can happen. First kill does go the way of the Dragons, though, but it's looking up for the Crusaders. Trade of ultimates back and forth. Ishan finds a beautiful shutdown, and Melee Vane, he stays alive, and look at this. The Dragons are finding a way to win the fight with their 80 carry in hand. Sure, you may have taken Baron, but oh my god, Darwin Theory is smurfing this game. Flash forward, though, from Melee Vane. Can he pick up the shutdown? No, not just yet. Another snare comes across for Darwin Theory, a double, and now he's chasing down the Draven. Whiffs another Q. Baron Empowered Minions doing a ton of work, but it's actually helping Melee Vane heal back up. It is the battle of wits here, back and forth, and it looks like Melee Vane is going to cut his losses and try to leave. Oh my gosh. Final Sparks cooldown on just like 20 seconds. It allows this Lux to just churn them out so much, but in the end, Balding goes Baron secured for Crusaders at a high price.
Yes, it's a high price, but you'd also have to look at the people that it's still on and that it's still alive on. We have Darwin, who is an absolute menace right now. I mean, we saw him almost delete 3 members. Oh, but Melee Vane trying to make something happen.
Don't mess with the Croc. That is a huge shutdown for Boat Chicken, and it's the same thing again. Balding goes, Melee Vane is just too far up constantly on this Draven, thinking he can 1v9.
Yep, I mean, you said it yourself. Don't mess with the Croc or you're going to feel the shock of getting absolutely eviscerated with a giant saw blade. And, you know, maybe that was Melee Vane not having... Oh, hold on. Indeed.
Look at this flank, though. Yeah, it looks like Team Wild able to get behind and lock down the Morgana, who immediately has to pop. Zanius tries to get the Soul Shackles out, but the AP damage is just too much, and the Cavalry comes to back up the Morgana. Wolven Alchemist picks up a double. Final Spark doesn't find its mark, but they're able to push in this Baron-empowered wave now, and the base is sure to drop for the Dragon.
That was some very fire bars there, Slayer. I mean, at this rate, I think.
Oh my!
Oh wow, that's a lot of damage.
The action doesn't stop, but look at Melee Vane. He's able to flash around. Those spinning axes land, but there's another Final Spark from Darwin Theory. That cooldown comes across. That was about 800 damage to the face of that Draven, and that might be all she wrote with the carries down. It looks like the Crusaders are going to come out and take this game over the Dragons in the showcase, the first match of Week 7 showcase of the AD.
Yeah, I think Dragons there did have some life, did have some embers in their gut ready to breathe fire upon the Crusaders, but Crusaders then pulled out the Dragon Skin Shield in the form of Becky Rita and Darwin Theory, and ultimately pulled things back there, especially with a good performance from Boat Chicken. And I think as we wait for a second here, we will potentially get back to the desk, but I think, you know, as I said, the Dragons definitely had some life there, but I think a few misplays to their favor or to their misfortune, unfortunately, did not put them in a good spot.
Yeah, certainly not a good spot, but to break it all down, we're going to bring Thunder back on in here, get us back over to the analyst desk to break down a huge Game 1 win of the Week 7 slate for the Crusaders versus the Dragons. It looks like he might be still glued to watching, maybe Darwin Theory. He's still glued to watching Darwin Theory's final sparks. I hope we'll be able to get him in here in a second, but Baldingos, I mean, it was such a fast-paced game once we got to that like 10, 12-minute mark. At certain points, it looked like it. I'm hearing the game is actually still live. I currently can't see it. It looks like we're having some technical difficulty, so we can't actually watch this, but the game is actually still live. We finally have it back. Oh my gosh. So the Crusaders
do not manage to take down the Nexus with that last push, but nonetheless have done significant damage. I mean, I say again, Darwin Theory is an absolute menace right now. And here comes the Renekton from that top lane. Oh, you know who else is a menace? Woven Alchemist. Huge damage onto the Hecarim. And I mean, there you have it. Things are not looking good for the Dragons right now as they're getting pushed into their base. Not even the Baron buff is active, and I think Becky Rita might even look for a kill here right off the tower's death.
There's another good route. Melee Vayne is actually keeping some great distance, respecting the Crusaders comp here. As a bit of an intriguing siege is coming across. Elder is up in the background, so we'll see if the Dragons decide to turn their attention towards the most OP buff in League of Legends, but no, they're going to crack the base a bit more wide open. There's another inhibitor drop. That will signify triple inhibs for the Crusaders, and Elder, they don't need it when they have Darwin Theory. Another beautiful final spark, but here comes the response. 3-man curse the Sad Mummy, a bunch of good damage out from Ishan. The Hecarim can jump forward, but the kills just don't come across. The shutdown onto the Maokai, but Nature's Grass sets up Lux for another beautiful kill. Actually, that was the Caitlyn. Everybody drops for the Dragons, and we finally do have the Crusaders closing it out as Melee Vayne can only watch as his base implodes. There we go, the ceremonial final kill. The Crusaders punch their ticket to 15 wins on the VAD season, and wow, Baldingos, it was back and forth at points, but it looks like the more poised team really was able to get the W.
Yes, I would wholly agree, Slayer, and I would like to say that it is a bit surprising, but at the same time, I mean, Crusaders have been so strong in this group stage that to see them pull out another win is nothing too shocking. And I do, as I was mentioning earlier during our little technical fluke, there was strong performances from every single player on the side of Crusaders, as well as good team play that I think really did solidify their place here in first for our group stage. And Dragons, well, they had excellent individual play, and while they were really poised and ready to actually pull things to their favor and win this game, I think they could have probably worked a little bit harder together, and I think in the scenario that they did, it would have led them to that victory that they've been looking for against Crusaders this group series.
Yeah, a great way to put it, Baldingos. But to get some more analysis, we're going to go back to the analyst desk, and now we will bring Thunder back on into the set here, hopefully in just a second, so we can break down the Crusaders win over the Dragons here. There we go. There he is, Thunder.
Hello.
Welcome back. I mean, back and forth contest nonetheless, but what do you make of that? What's the first thoughts that are coming out from you after the Crusaders were able to stomp out the Dragons in that game?
Well, I will say Dragons seemed like they were doing fairly decently in the early stages of the game. I will say Zola Bomber on the Hecarim was performing very well. We saw, again, we had a little bit of some swappage coming through. OTFF didn't manage to actually make it in. So during the draft, Zola Bomber ended up coming in. Ishan played in the mid lane, but I think the Hecarim performed pretty well. That said, we were talking a little bit about those team synergies, and we had some mispositioning. We had some, steps a little bit too far forward. And I think, Slayer, a lot of that came down to some of that team coordination not quite being there for Dragons at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy way to put this, Thunder. I mean, Melee Vane literally flashed into the entirety of Crusaders for a huge shutdown 4v1, like it was OG Tyler 1 gameplay on the Rift. Like, you can't just afford to flash into the entirety of Crusaders into Fog of War, give over that shutdown, because then the Crusaders, you talked about it, they were reeling. They're like, oh my god, we're starting to lose a grip on this game. But then they found their number. It's just target Melee Vane, and by putting yourself on that silver platter for the first shutdown, it just steamrolled into what we saw towards the later phases of that game.
Yeah, it's, it is unfortunate. You hate to see it go that way, and it was a rough game for Dragons overall towards the end of it, even though Melee Vane was performing quite well. But for the side of Crusaders, you stumble, they didn't even really stumble a little bit in the early game. They got that double kill. And it, kind of, there was a little bit of back and forth, but they just played cohesively, Baldingos. And I will say, we saw Becky Rita on the Maokai again, and the pick performed wonderfully. Got a couple of kills, and overall had a very strong performance on the tree pick. You called it out. It's one of those big, tanky, bulky champions, and it absolutely performed, facilitating the Lux, the Renekton lane. The Caitlyn just kind of did her thing, but I felt like that Maokai was a huge facilitator.
I think you're absolutely right, Thunder. The Maokai did absolutely massive work there. Definitely in the control as well. We also saw there, especially during the laning phase, I think a lot of the CC that Maokai brings to the table when it comes to that early when it comes to the early stages of the game, especially when you hit that root underground and then immediately lead it into a slam that knocks that champion back. It's definitely not something that you want to be against as a solo laner. I mean, we saw it earlier with the Malphite having to flash out just to survive. And I think that this early game pressure too, which I'd also really have to commend Becky Rita on for, not necessarily bringing or for pulling their champion a little bit out of their comfort zone in order to bring the aggression that's needed for going up against a jungler like Hecarim. Because when you have this jungler that is constantly harassing your other lanes, you have to be ready to move. We saw it early on when our friend Zolo Bomber ganked down in the bot lane in probably the first, 3-4 minutes. And Becky Rita immediately responded with that gank on top lane, matching that pressure and in a sense nullifying what makes Hecarim such a strong champion while still maintaining the strength of that Maokai, still putting their vision down, still putting their saplings down. And then, as we said, the Nature's Grasp, such an influential ult to the point where they needed to nerf it in this next patch. And I think really that did, as we said, the jungle was played to the strength of the game, and the stronger jungler may have prevailed this time.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. And again, the MVP voting is just about to wrap up. If you haven't voted yet, go and click it. Go and click it right now. But we have a couple of results that have come in. Well, really, it's only the one. Vipers have defeated the Falcons 1-0. So current standings right now, Falcons, Unicorns, and Dragons are all tied at 9 wins apiece. Dragons are sitting at 11 losses. I believe actually that Falcons are indeed at the 10 losses as well. So currently 9 wins. Dragons are down that 1 loss. Falcons and Unicorns play in the next match. I believe the Unicorns game is still wrapping up, so we'll see where it is. But we are still not out of the woods on ties yet. We absolutely are not. Dragons only have 1 more game to play for the night, as again, one of their games was the Rattlers, FF, Unicorns as well. After their first game, we'll have 1 more game to play for the night. So Falcons, they still have 3 matches to go, but it should be interesting, something to keep an eye on. So nobody is out of the woods, but I believe once our producer lets us know if the MVP screen is ready, we can go ahead and show that up for you. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't think any of us will be too surprised. But right before we do that, we do Actually, oh, there we go. And it is Becky Rita. We talked about the Maokai. We talked about the tree in the jungle. 5, 3, and 16. Facilitator all the way through. Willing to die for their team. Not the flashiest, but certainly the most effective. Congratulations, Becky Rita, for winning MVP for our first game of the night. And Slayer, I want to hear your thoughts on it. Again, the whole team, I think the team as a whole really, really performed, but this Maokai pick, again, really popped off.
I'm always a fan of when the non-flashy player gets the recognition they deserve, and Becky Rita deserved that recognition. I mean, you saw the stat line, you saw how many Nature's Grasp was just so impactful in those I don't know, hundreds of team fights we saw across that game for the Crusaders versus the Dragons. But I do also want to shout out, this Lux pick from Darwin Theory, because there were a couple of times where the fights seemed to be getting a bit skewed, right? You saw Wolven Alchemist get picked off. You saw the Renekton go a little too far forward. Becky Rita even dropped a couple of times those team fights, but he was able to constantly land 2-man snares, and I probably fired 50 final sparks out in that game with the cooldown at level 3, and was absolutely evaporating, Ishan and Melee Veins. So Becky Rito set up this Lux for a lot of success, but Darwin Theory, I believe, also deserves a ton of praise for executing, because as much as you stack up the cards, you still got to knock them down, and Darwin Theory certainly did multiple times.
Exactly. So again, congratulations to the Crusaders. They have now officially locked sole possession of first place in their group. There's absolutely no way anybody can even tie them in record. So, hey, they've effectively done it. But we'll take a brief break here in just a couple of, just a few short minutes. But our next game is Astronauts versus Razorbacks. Now, notably, the Bandits versus Razorbacks matchup, that all-important game, Bandits have won it. Both teams received an FF win. Lions and Sharks decided not to play this week because they were eliminated from playoffs. So they only have one game left to play. Bandits have a 1-game lead over the Razorbacks with this win. So even if Razorbacks win against Astronauts and Bandits lose, Bandits will have the head-to-head. Bandits have secured second place. Razorbacks are now fighting to see how good of a record they can maintain and to see if they can take down the Giant in their group. But we'll take a very brief break before we come back and talk about that game in just a little bit. Don't go anywhere. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Now, just very briefly, teams are ready to play. We have Astronauts, we have Razorbacks. This is a big, this is a big time matchup. The top three in the group, though Astronauts can no longer catch up to Bandits. This is a pretty big match. Notably, Beatus, Skeetus for Razorbacks will be playing in the mid lane. We're going to try to get through this nice and quickly. Slayer, to you, what are the things that you are looking for in this matchup? What excites you the most?
I think the big matchup is in the mid lane. It's kind of a clash of the Titans, if you want me to relate it to an old school LCS clash of the Titans. It's Cloud9 Jensen versus TSM Bjergsen is what you're getting here in the VAD. DeFox versus Beatus Skeetus are two Titans of Group A in the mid lane, so you're going to want to watch the mid lane, have your eyes glued to it all game long.
Mm-hmm. Of course. They are two powerhouses. Beatus, of course, dominating the top lane. It's decided to go ahead and come and dominate the mid lane. Valdingos, what are you keeping an eye on for this awesome matchup?
I mean, I would love to say something different for the sake of being interesting, but the reality of the situation is that I've already seen Defoe's absolutely stunning performances in mid lane live in front of my very eyes, and that's never something I could get sick of. So I'm also excited to see what you guys are calling this legendary matchup, and I'm very I wait in anticipation for it.
Wonderful. Well, you do not have to wait for very long. Again, both teams are in draft ready to play. This is game number 2 for the night, a Group A matchup. Astronauts versus Razorbacks. Boys, take away the draft.
Thank you so much, Thunder. It's always rough to let Thunder go, Baldingos, but we do have to get into this draft, and obviously it's a much different matchup, right? The comfort picks for either one of these teams look a ton different than the Falcons versus the Crusaders, but we always go back to that meta conversation. You saw a lot of meta picks come out in that game number 1. As we get into bans here, do you expect any of those similar picks that you saw maybe from game 1 to get banned out here as we get into game 2 draft?
I would say that it wouldn't surprise me that we see these bans. I mean, right off the bat, Astronauts with the Fiddlesticks ban, Razorbacks instantly responding with the Shaco. And if I do recall, Astronauts have a Shaco one trick here, don't we?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but based off that ban, you got to think, right?
You would think. And I mean, there we go. Even more rapid bans. Pike, Diego, Victor, Maokai can barely keep up. It's not even a play-by-play, and I'm losing my mind. I mean, I expect, Maokai ban, very reasonable. Viego is somewhat interesting. It's a champion that you see, is definitely in a spot to be a strong champion and to be a nuisance in a game. But it's not something I think we've seen a lot of here in the series. Although I do also believe that Astronauts jungler is very strong on the champion, and the Victor ban as well is fairly interesting, as a champion that's been so strong since the rework in season 10, or the item rework. The Yuumi
Ezreal is a very intriguing pairing. Now, I don't know if you know this, Baldingos, but I'm actually, unfortunately, I've been playing AD carry for very long, and Ezreal is near and dear to my heart. I actually just recently got enough of the I don't know what the purple essence is called in your inventory. The mythic essence. I got just enough to buy the final Ezreal skin. I have all of them now. Prestige, Psych, Ops, Ezreal. So I love Ezreal to death. Really interesting to see him pair with Yuumi, though. I feel like it's kind of a clash of ideologies. Yuumi obviously is very about protecting a scaling AD carry that wants to glide walk, get a ton of auto attacks out, and scale into the late game. Ezreal is about, that mid-game power spike, that Mara mana coming online with maybe with a mythic item paired. It kind of can fall off in the damage department when it comes to the later stages of the game, but the Razorbacks immediately pick another threat that you could put the Yuumi on that does fit late game scaling with the gangplank.
Yep, and on the side of Astronauts, Defoe has shown us the way once, and he will show us again. Xerath locked in. Very, very exciting. I mean, what I find that Defoe has been very strong with is that his picks tend to always have flexibility. I think here, Xerath, I recall his former matches, definitely was a devastating pick for the other team because of the amount of access that Xerath has. Unlike most other mages, where some of your skill shots don't necessarily or can only hit one person, are limited to so many targets. When it comes to Xerath, as long as you could point and click there, you can do damage there. And when you look at a team that has Ezreal and Gangplank, a team that you want to be staying away from, Xerath is a good pick to synergize there in order to have safe damage. But also, we'll see actually the Kayn pick from Razorbacks. And not to mention the 4 very quick bans, Ahri, Nocturne, Darius, and Aatrox from the Astronauts and Razorbacks, respectively. And it doesn't surprise me to see the Aatrox and the Darius ban. I do believe Astronauts also had what Gurf lovingly referred to as a scary dairy back in week 4. And so there is definitely a sense of knowledge here from the Razorbacks, trying to keep themselves in their second place position. And we get the Belveth pick.
There are so many crazy picks flying out in this game. I don't even know what to make of it. You have the MLG Irelia picked up in the second phase of picks. Kayn is obviously a very sort of pivotal pick that you can go in a couple of ways with for the side of the Razorbacks. The compositions come together. I was going to make the point earlier that you first pick a Mumu. There's the flexibility of where can you send the Amumu, where can you send the Seraphine as well, and it looks like they're actually going to be pairing up together in the bottom lane, which is certainly interesting because when you think about what you want to do to shut down an Ezreal, you kind of have to pick something that can bully him off waves early, can maybe even kill him off early so he can't scale up to that 2-item power spike. Amumu and Seraphine are far from the duo that could potentially do that, huh, Baldingos?
I mean, that's exactly it, Slayer. If I were to give any strength to Amumu and Seraphine, it would be their ability to have decent CC chains and such. But that's, I think it goes without saying that with an Ezreal on the lane, that's not the perfect combination, considering how slippery that champion is with his warp allowing him to buffer CC for a bit. Now, while you could also say that, well, the both champions altogether have, 3 amounts or 3 bits of CC between the pair, it's also the problem of Ezreal, I think, just has so much stronger damage. And even if you might argue that there's some amount of damage for the Astronauts, the presence of that Yuumi is going to amplify the problems that come across when an Ezreal and a Seraphine battle in a vacuum. I mean, if Seraphine isn't landing their skill shots, the Ezreal is going to run away with that every day of the week.
Yeah, great point to make there, Baldingos. Is in a vacuum, this 2v2 is going to look very one-sided towards the Razorbacks, but there's a couple other focal points I want to touch on about these team compositions that are really intriguing to think about when it comes to that Razorback composition, right? Because when you pick a champion like Kayn, it's sort of unpredictable for Give Me a Cup twice, right? You have the ability to go blue, that more assassin-oriented build. You can go towards that Ross form for the more bruiser, long, elongated team fight prowess. What are you expecting from the Razorback jungler, purely based off of what you see from the comps on what form they potentially could go for this big game against the Astronauts?
Well, when the Irelia is in play, you have a champion that is very dominant, very bruisery. A Rost could contest with that in a competent manner, as well as the Belveth champion we haven't seen too much of, I don't think, in this group stage. And it's one of those champions where people are still kind of trying to figure out how to play her, because with how relatively new she is and how really unique her playstyle is as well, it leaves a vacuum of really what kind of champion is she? Is she a sustain? Is she a bruiser? Is she a tank? Is she a very fast attacking, almost glorified melee ADC of some sorts? It's definitely confusing. And I think that when we look at how damage is spread here, there are 4 threats here, assuming that Seraphine builds damage. There's the Seraphine, the Xerath, the Irelia, and the Belveth. Okay. 2 of those are bruisers, 2 of those are mages.
Mhm.
And while a blue cane could, or excuse me, Shadow Assassin, as it's properly called,
There you go.
could theoretically blow up the mages. That then leaves you with with 2 bruisers that are going to outsustain and probably outdamage you too if you're not careful. But if we flip the script and we pick a red cane, you take out these bruisers, but after such a lengthy fight where you're even might not even have half your health bar, you're going to be easy pickings for these mages that have in the meantime scurried off and taken all the time to get their abilities back and rain down hell on you. And one thing we should mention too is the presence of the Galio. Now, if I am correct, yes, Galio will be in the mid lane.
Mhm.
And so I think this could get very hairy for the astronauts, especially on the bot lane, where Galio, his ultimate allows him to teleport anywhere. Well, not anywhere on the map, but it allows him to quickly teleport to a teammate. I do believe it's unstoppable unless actually no, it's not unstoppable. Even in a Hextech ultimatum. The the blaring issue, I think, for the uh Razorbacks is that they have a fairly the form of their front line is mainly the Galio. And the Galio will be roaming a lot here for in the mid lane. And I just think that they won't have the right amount of pressure when they need it. In the event that, let's say, for instance, Dragon is up, right? In the event that Galio goes top lane, you now have a Belveth, a Xerath, and a Seraphine, and a Mumu to contest with in the drag pit. And who do you have down there? You have your Yuumi, your Ezreal, and then your Kayn. 3 champions that, assuming that this happens early, Kane is not going to have the amount of sustain that he needs to stay in a fight with these 3, maybe 4 champions. And so if I had to say something right now, I would say that the Razorbacks probably should end up going for that Rost Kane in order to make up for that lack of frontline they have. And for the side of the astronauts, they are probably going to have to play very strongly into this Irelia and Xerath if they're looking to put things away early.
Wow, very detailed definition of what we could potentially see from this Kane. But we're getting into the speculate time. Well, Dingo, so quickly we got to get to a prediction here. Are you backing whichever form in your Rost form prediction for this Kane and the Razorbacks, or are you going to stick with the astronauts who are the kings of VAD from the regular season so far?
I think that in the later stages of the game, assuming there's a Rost and assuming Galio hasn't absolutely thrown, the Galio frontline has been very strong for a while. And if the Galio can simply soak up the damage that the Aurelia and the Belveth are pushing out, whilst the Kayn is out there doing damage, I think Gangplank, Yuumi, and Ezreal have enough mobility and damage between them to keep that backline from the astronauts from going completely out of hand, and then maybe even turn the fight to their favor. And I guess I even forgot that the Yuumi was there. I think just the presence of that Yuumi alone, assuming nothing goes wrong, in a vacuum, the Yuumi along with the Kayn will be an absolute menace on the Summoner's Rift here. So my prediction to summarize is for the Razorbacks here.
Wow. All right. Well, I am going to comfortably take the astronauts. So Baldingos and me are put up against each other for this game, too. But to find out how everything goes down, we're going to go to a quick break. On the other side, it's the astronauts versus the Razorbacks. Don't go anywhere, Victoris faithful. Welcome back onto Summoner's Rift for our second game of Week 7 of the VAD. It's going to be the Astronauts on your blue side versus the Razorbacks. We've got two very intriguing comps coming out for this matchup in Baldingo. It looks like we could have another interesting invade here, this time coming from the top side, and Bobbert is going to have to look out very early on.
And look out, they did, scrambling away, throwing a ward in that bush, and the astronauts know it as they begin their recall to get back to their lanes, and maybe, oh, or not. You see the Velvet actually roll in there. Oh no, Mike, get away from the bush.
Oh, Mike immediately having to flash the Baron pit wall. Give me a cup twice. Getting a key summoner out. That's going to be something we're going to have to watch going forward.
I think more that is less a guarantee that you have some more breathing room for aggression on the bot lane. And I think that Sonic and Lost in Paradise are probably going to take that opportunity of, okay, we're probably not going to get flashed bandaged on now. That's good. They can breathe a little easier now, knowing that that early game aggression is now off the table. And speaking of off the table, it does not appear that anybody's going to be moving to leash their junglers. Can I get a rip in chat for that? But this is two very competent solo junglers. And when we speak about junglers, looking at Give Me a Cup, it does appear that with the Conqueror, theoretically speaking, they could be looking to shift towards the Rost. I have a mate who is definitely an avid Kayn player, abuser, whatever you want to call it. And I have seen them do blue Kayn several times with Conqueror. So that may not mean anything, but I would like to think that it is signs that Give Me a Cup will be rolling into the red Kayn. Speaking of rolling, Napquan is, wow, absolutely decimating Bobbert right now.
Power of level 2 Irelia is coming out in full forces here, but it looks like Bobbert is going to be able to just back up on towards his turret, and he'll claim level 2 there. But you got to play careful in this matchup as Gangplank, because Irelia is about as big of a lane bully as they come. But look at this, the turn! Bobbert finds first blood, ignite, Q, and good night to Napquan. What a solo kill for first blood in the top lane.
There we go. There may be what I believe is they consider Ionian Might, and then there is the Wonders that is in orange, dipped in salt water. Bobbert baits Napquan under the tower there, and using the Cure Scurvy and the Ignite, secures himself the first kill. Definitely not how you want to see things going if you're the Astronauts in the first 3 minutes of the match. And we won't see the junglers meet each other. However, I would be advised, Astronauts are pushed up on this bot lane. It seems that, yep, we'll get a gank here from Give Me a Cup, but who will dash actually through Mike's Revenge and flash maybe some Sonic as well, I think. Nope, that is not true. And it won't come to anything, but nonetheless, very good exercising of early game aggression here. Something that Kayn is very strong and needs to do, especially if he wants that form early.
Yeah, but certainly a bit of a mistime there between the jungler and his bottom lane duo. 50-40 Lost in Paradise were a little too far back, dealing with the minion wave to go for that aggression, but the gank path was a very well taken path nonetheless. But well, the thing is, I gotta ask you, because, you know, when you talk about these comps, got a couple wacky picks, but you kind of forfeit the bot lane if you're the Astronauts for this top lane, and now this Gangplank already rocking a Sheen in a matchup where he shouldn't be even allowed to farm comfortably.
You make an excellent point, Slayer. The top lane is certainly a contender in this match, as well as the mid lane, so hopefully in the events that Astronauts' plans for said top lane fall through, Defoe may be there to pick up a little bit of the slack, but you're absolutely right. The pressure that Bobbert is putting upon Napcon. Oh,
hold on a minute, though. Give me a cup twice. Another gank. This time, Mike will bandage toss on top of 50-40. Ignite, exhausted, and no kills found. But like you talked about, Bendigo, some more stacks towards that Rust by jumping on the Sad Mummy.
Although I might have seen some blue orbs go over, and I think if Give Me a Cup Twice isn't careful, they may accidentally end up stacking their Shadow Assassin on this Seraphine before they end up for their Rost. That is not to say that you can't just wait the timer, although as I understand, it's a very inefficient way to do things. And even as efficient as Napquan is, they're still finding absolutely no traction, even getting pushed in on this lane. And I mean, you said it yourself, it's quite the 180 here for Bobbert to be dominant in this lane. I think it does have to do in large part to that early Sheen power spike, especially on an ability like the Parlay. So here we go. Parlay, shots coming out. Wow, Goldfan taking a lot of damage there.
Cannon Barrage comes across too, and Bobbert finds his second kill in a third of the minutes. We're 6 minutes into the game. You can't gank a Gangplank with Cannon Barrage. It seems like it's opposite day in the top lane for the Razorbacks.
Ooh, opposite, and we might see a gank as well. Give Me a Cup Twice. Really hoping to maybe make something happen. Is creeping, yep, up towards the tower. We might see a shove here for the favor of Bobbert, but nothing will come of it. As we tune back into the mid lane, I mean, it's honestly, Galio has always been such a harsh matchup for mages. I think, especially since the Season 10 changes, he has been one of those champions that is just does exactly what they're designed to do, be an anti-mage, and it goes to show Defoe and Betiskides are just farming it out here in this mid lane with a little bit of poke going towards the Galio, but nothing is coming of it because of his magic shield. So I think as we creep into the later minutes of this game, when we look at the stalemates across the board, but we do see the Gangplank pulling ahead, I think any lead is a good lead, and the Razorbacks are looking to make a statement here this evening.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we didn't get a touch on it too much, but sure, you can't vie for that second seed or even the first seed that the Astronauts are holding, but if you want to make a run for the championship of the VAD, you're going to have to beat teams like Astronauts. So to show up and put up a beautiful scoreline like this in a very coveted nearly final regular season game against the said #1 seed Astronauts is certainly nothing to scoff at. But interestingly enough, Napcon is once again going to go for more trades on the Bobbert. There's Vanguard's edge popped, and the orange is not going to save him. He's forced to flash, but is matched by Napcon. A huge shutdown, and the Astronauts take a hold back of the gold lead.
Very well played there from Napcon. They're getting very low, but not panicking as one might do at lower elos. And speaking of lower elos, on the lower side of the map, the Dragon is up, and we have lane prio from the side of Astronauts. Despite this, it does seem that the Belveth is on the top side of the map, taking the Rift Herald at the moment. So we might potentially see a trade here for the Drake, or we're going to have a little bit of time before it is taken, perhaps even a team fight in between. And as we, look back onto the bot lane, it is what I honestly must say, it's much closer than I thought it would be. I was under the impression.
Hold on a minute, though. Beautiful Curse of the Sad Mummy, but Bobbert and Give Me a Cup Twice come to bail out 50-40 with an ultimate pair of their own. Kit Kat will have to flash on away in what looked like a dire situation for the Razorback 80 carries. Actually, a huge kill given over to the Kane.
I mean, I stand corrected. I was saying it was a bit of a stalemate down there, but it seems that the scales have shifted to the favor of the Razorbacks. First kill going to... wait, no.
Bobbert took it.
Yeah, Bobbert took it. He Cannon Barrage. Okay. So now we see this Gangplank getting even more fed, doing even more damage, and we'll
boy.
see how he performs in this situation, although I wouldn't be very hopeful. Gets ignited and absolutely shredded apart as we see Belveth raising her children to take down this tower, probably with a Rift Herald as well. And, you know, one of the most interesting abilities I honestly think in a while, the ability to summon these extra little minions from slain enemy minions, makes this champion's tower taking ability just absolutely absurd. I mean, look at this. Give me a cup twice. Is honestly surprisingly a little scared to move up to this tower. I mean, rightly so. There's a lot of minions here and could take a lot of damage as well. And even though the tower damage is nothing to scoff at this early in the game, I would also be a bit frightened if I was giving me a cup twice. And well, we do see a kill again go onto the Gangplank for the Belveth. I still am skeptical of whether or not it will be enough for the astronauts to start building that front line that they'll need if they are going to have Defoe pull out their usual stops and then have Stone Kit Kat as well in that backline helping them out.
Well, they certainly are holding a somewhat comfortable gold lead at 11 minutes. I was curious to see if Giving Me a Cup twice would be able to answer the Rift Herald play with Dragon, but he actually didn't go for his first back until about 10 minutes in and was immediately forced to path top to try and stop first turret from going down so early on, with 5 plates taken on that top lane play. Ends up just being 4, but the astronauts, they may not have the kill lead, but they are sitting on about 1,500 gold over the Razorbacks as we head into mid game. They might make it a bit more. Goldband jumping into mid lane, gets the knockup, and Galio cancels the taunt, and that sends Skeetus flashing. The right of the arcane, the third shot doesn't land for Defoe. He's gonna flash auto to kill off Galio. When have you seen a Xerath get a kill with an auto attack? It's been very long for myself, and Give Me a Cup twice may even get jumped on in the bottom lane, going for a clear, but he doesn't have his bot lane with him. He has to Q over the wall and flash away from the Encore, and now they're going to set their sights on the Ezreal. Mike's Revenge, Curse of the Sad Mummy over Ezreal. One more Bandage Toss is not available, though, so a couple of low health bars and Summoner's Burn, but the jungle duo and bot duo for the Razorbacks is able to get out safe.
And we will see a move on to the Drake, and now 2 jungle objectives for astronauts. Pretty early in the game, I might add as well. They are starting to take this lead a little bit farther than I anticipated, and I honestly would probably accompany that to the fact that, or excuse me, then attest to the fact of how much early strength Belveth has as a champion. And speaking of early strength, Napguan is starting to do work on the top lane now. Does have that Blade of the Rune King power spike to their name, and is starting to prove to Bobbert that they're not completely out of this game. But as I was mentioning beforehand, I think really what's happening here is that Give Me a Cup twice is struggling to keep up with the Belveth due to the nature of Kayn. You know, he's not too powerful pre-transformation, and even despite this, he is already trying to do work, but it gets absolutely ripped in half by Napguan. And I think, you know, especially when we are talking about a champion that needs time, this is not a scenario you want to be in if you're Give Me a Cup twice, because losing that time for that transformation, while I do think eventually it will automatically become available, that is far too late in the game to be able to make a difference. And as it stands, you have these 2 bruisers who are starting to run away with the game, and you really have to get things moving, but it's so hard to do against a champion like Belveth.
Yeah, certainly very difficult to do. The big thing to point out here, it is a 50 CS lead now for Napguan, who's completely bounced back from a disastrous early game for Irelia against Gangplank, is now back in a bunch of a driver's seat. There's a good shoot from Skeetus, and Ross form has been picked up for Give Me a Cup twice, despite giving a kill away for Irelia, and you're starting to see the power of that Kayn. The knockup comes across onto Mike's Revenge, but nothing can be found. It seems like the astronauts are going to try and prioritize picking up a second bout of Shelly here. We're going to clear out vision, but Give Me a Cup Twice is also going to clear out some vision of his own. Bobbert is hanging around here towards the top side, and Galio's available, but Goldfan has Mike's Revenge on his side, so they have the man advantage currently. The very powerful Napquan, nearly 2 items deep, has also swung over, and this should be the Astronauts securing their second Rift Herald for virtually free.
Yep, I would say virtually free is very correct. No one moves to contest. We'll see a pat down to the bot lane. And not in time for Drake, however. Still 2 minutes up. And I don't think our friend Give Me a Cup Twice will be able to find anything here for the bot lane. As more movement towards the mid lane, it seems this Rift Herald is going to start pushing even further in. After getting that top tower, we'll now get the bottom tower. Cannon Barrage actually for to maybe push Astronauts off the map, but nonetheless, that tower damage is still coming in. Mike's got Revenge diving in. Oh, and we'll see
Hero's Entrance comes across. Umbral Trespass will give Me a Cup Twice some health back, and he's able to turn, and Mike's has to walk away with bare health bars, but here comes the Hyper Carry. Napquan able to land to stun up onto the Galio, but no Xerath ultimates can land on top of this Kayn, and Yuumi comes to the rescue somehow. It looks like it's only going to be a turret secured for the Astronauts, and it took a lot of fighting to get to that point.
Took a lot of fighting, and honestly, I think had Aurelia been there sooner, that would have been a very different story, and that the tower would have been taken sooner with a lot less resistance from the side of Razorbacks, assuming that they have recognized at this point, yeah, Aurelia's a little bit fed. She is going Immortal Shieldbow by the looks of it, so that is something to look out for. Unlike Bobbert, who is really just trying to make do here.
There's Vanguard's Edge, and there's a Rampage for Napquan. Just absolutely a complete 180 in that top lane matchup from just about 10 minutes ago. And Give Me a Cup Twice looked like he wanted a piece of Irelia, but the healing on that Q from the Irelia, just too much. Napquan is going to be able to get away once again, now sporting a 450 gold bounty.
I don't know, Slayer. I know I said that the Razorbacks could pull things through here, but I mean, it does seem that the Astronauts are not #1 for no reason. There's definitely a level of coordination being exercised, and also of map control. I'm noticing a lot that there's been pretty much no moves towards the objectives from the side of Razorbacks, whether that's Drake, whether that's towers. If we look at the tower health, I mean, most of the towers for the side of Astronauts are almost untouched, whether that be because of the weak pushing power of this team, even though you do have a Gangplank, who has, granted, been pushed back fairly far in their lane. And I do think that, you know, the Astronauts are creating a convincing lead. Speaking of convincing lead, there's a convincing bandage toss.
Yeah, what an interesting death brush spot as Defoe will finally be able to line up right of the Arcane. And now that poor Yuumi, final chapter popped, but Kit Kat secures the kill on the very last Feline. That's going to be another 2 kills in the bottom lane, and they're just going to knock more of those neutrals objectives down.
Now at the 18-minute mark, 8 kills for the Astronauts. And, you know, we mentioned the idea of scaling a lot, and the side of the Astronauts have some of the hardest scaling champions in the game. I know everybody knows who's the bad bruiser on the block. It's Aurelia. Never a fun time to play a game into a fully built Aurelia who just feels immortal to some point. And then there's the scaling of Belveth, who quite literally by design is, you know, meant to be a scaling menace with an uncapped stat. Speaking of uncapped, there's the uncapped ultimate.
Yeah, here comes the pick, though. They're chasing down Napquan. They couldn't land Hero's Entrance. Umbral Trespass buys some time. Betestitas gets the flash taunt, and they've picked off the Irelia. A huge shutdown as the Razorback finally get one back in the kill column.
As a good friend of mine once said, history doesn't rhyme, but it doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. You know, seeing Napquan up there probably felt a little bit too comfortable in their lane. They didn't have a lot of vision up there, or it was clear as they were moving away, and they got caught out. That shutdown goes, and I don't recall who it went to, but regardless, I think that if there is a moment for the Razorbacks to do anything, it's now. By virtue of the fact that they have that carry set back a little bit, maybe you could move to get some map control, get some tower damage, and start putting some less room between you and your opposition. And as we keep kind of peeking in here at the state of all these players, we do see most mythic items built, or at least first items in the event for those, i.e. Gangplank, who don't build it immediately. And if I had to also mention something, it's the fact that Defoe has actually found themselves on a 250 gold bounty. Something that kind of came out of left field, if I must confess. As I said, that early laning phase was very benign between him and Bitiskitas, which I know is somewhat disappointing. Speaking of not disappointing.
Ooh, there's a whiff encore there from KitKat, but they're still able to jump on to give me a cup twice. Utilizes Umbral Trespass, but it might only stall the ultimate price. He falls to Napquan. Yumi, a little pesky, was able to get on top of 54 to get out, but it's a huge pick on the Razorback jungler with Baron up, and we're not done with the action yet. Defoe is now getting chased down by Bitiskitas. A good slow on the Xerath W. The stun whiffs, though, and the Galio taunt should be lined up, but it's just out of range. He hesitated just a little bit casting it. And on the other side of the rift, Belveth, hyper-scaling attack speed, ladies and gentlemen, means easy Baron takes the 21 minutes. Upgraded form grab for Goldfan, and the Baron power play is among us with a huge gold lead for these astronauts.
Hyper-scaling champion, not only with attack speed, but also with additional true damage per auto attack. And as things progress here, they do have this Baron buff. They are maybe looking to make a push here, and so right now the side of the Razorbacks are stuck, and with a composition like this, it's pretty hard to be in that situation. Kayn, I specifically mentioned that Kayn and Galio, I find, are both very active champions. You have to be moving around the map a lot. You have to be exercising the control that you have, and when you're left in the situation where you have to siege, where you just have to farm, it doesn't spell well for the scaling for these champions. And so, not only are astronauts scaling a little harder, they seem to be scaling faster. And speaking of fast, Bitiskitas is getting ripped apart by this Belveth. My goodness.
Slice and dice say goodnight, Bitiskitas. This Galio had no chance against Goldfan now. 2 items down, comfortably scaling along, and we talked about those neutral objectives that the Razorbacks have no control over. They still haven't taken a single turret, and they will now lose Soul Point Ocean Drake. And look, hey, look, Bobbert's gonna get one back at least, though. All thing goes, that's something, right?
Yes, I think that is something. In a situation where things are going as south as they are, I mean, you're 8k gold, 6 kills, and several towers and objectives down, anything counts. And normally this is the part where I would default to X team has to hold on. In this team, X team is the Razorbacks. While I would say that potentially the Gangplank and the Kayn have that potential to scale very hard into that late game, I just don't know if it can contest with Death Bush.
Goldfan might get turned on here by the cavalry, but look at the turn back onto Bobber. The Yumi healing does enough, but this Kayn is burning down. Umbral Trespass, though, is enough to reconcile the pick onto the Fed Belveth, but look at everything they're giving up on the other side. They already lose mid inhibitor with the Baron push from the astronauts. There goes the bot inhibitor turret dropping, and the bot inhibitor fall quietly behind that as well, potentially. But now actually the Kayn is back. Bitiskitas is also returned, and they're going to try and chase down the Sad Mummy. Flash from Amumu creates a good enough distance. The Galio flash forward, 2-man taunt. They are jumping Napquan, but do they have the damage? Curse the Sad Mummy lands onto a couple, but it is to the demise of Mike's Revenge. He will end up falling, but he does enough to stall out for Napquan to escape.
Unfortunately, I do think Mike may or may not have bungled that flash a little bit. And while they will get taken out, there is still, as you said, a lot won here for the side of Astronauts. They have already taken an inhibitor and 2 towers with this Baron push, and I think that if you're the Astronauts, you are in a comfortable place. Kind of going back to my previous point before things kicked off, Kayn and Gangplank, I would say, are the 2 best scalers in this equation. Ooh, and it seems that we're about to see why.
The Fox, though, I mean, look at all the distance he can create. It forces a flash out of Give Me a Cup twice, gets the knock up on Ross, and the flash from Xerath comes across. But look at this, Gold Fan shows up, knocks up Ross, say goodnight, darkened friend, and now the Yuumi can only just run for the hills, but he'll only find a gray screen. Just such great macro moves to bail out each other. It's how top-level teams play in VAD.
And this is the top team, without a doubt. You know, being number 1 in the group stage is not something you do just by playing the game for fun. Well, you can play the game for fun, but you cannot you gotta play with purpose, and these players are definitely playing with purpose. One more time. I think even in the scenario that they're allowed to scale, the odds that they're up against here for the Razorbacks are simply too great, especially with that Bel'Veth already building, already getting onto that Death Stance, which is just such a powerful item, especially on a champion that built as much AD as Bel'Veth. I mean, we'll see it here, you know, no work needed, doing huge amounts of damage and Give Me a Cup a run for their money and sending them packing.
It seems like this Kayn can't do anything. He gets jumped on by a Bel'Veth, he gets too close to the Astronauts, but from distance he's getting pelted by this Xerath as well. They are now focusing their action onto the remaining inhibitors. They're going to send a 4-man crew towards bot, but no inhibitor picked up, and they might have picked off Mike. Curse of the Sad Mummy will force out the Kayn into a stun, and this Xerath does so much work in the background. Goldfan is eviscerating the back line, and it's all Astronauts. Right of the Arcane will send Ezreal packing back to turret, and this is likely going to be it. It's going to come down to the heroics of 50-40 and Lost in Paradise 1 versus 5, but oh my god, Bel'Veth can tank a turret and heal back to full. The super minions have arrived, and this will be the Astronauts stamping themselves as the team to beat in VAD in Week 7 with a huge win over the Razorbacks.
Amen to that, Slayer. An excellent performance for both teams, but nonetheless, the Astronauts, oh my, will prove themselves to be number 1 once again. And as we'll crawl up here to the analyst desk, I believe we will be getting our friend Thunder back in here.
Hello. Welcome everybody back to the analyst desk. Congratulations to the Astronauts for taking home the game. They're showing once again why they are the top seed in Group A. Of course, MVP voting is right over there, but Slayer Baldinga, thank you so much for another phenomenal cast. And I mean, honestly, aside from a little bit of top lane GP shenanigans, Slayer, that just felt like a relatively clean game from Astronauts.
Yeah, and it just shows the resiliency that I kind of mentioned in the game from top teams, right? Things aren't always going to go perfect. I don't care how good of a team you are. You're going to have lapses, and Bobber was able to capitalize on that versus Napquan, but the team really came together and said, you know what? We trust Napquan to come back in this matchup with the Irelia. Let's focus on those other lanes. And you saw that it was just a focus on neutral objectives. I mean, Goldfan was on top of the first Rift Herald, was able to get on top of the first couple Drakes, got the second bout of Shelly right when it respawns. And yes, they were down in kills until about 12, 13 minutes of the game, but it didn't matter because they had the gold lead, knocking down so many turrets and so much of that standing gold. It's a beautifully macro-oriented way to play, and it's why the Astronauts are, 17-2 now, Thunder, on the season?
Yes, they are a very, very strong team. Notably, they did lose to Crusaders on the other side of the bracket. They weren't able to pick that win up, but they have just looked so consistent and so strong. And I mean, honestly, we haven't seen the Bel'Veth pick very often, Baldingos, but it performed here. It performed really well. You were talking about it, kind of that, 80 carry type bruiser that just pumps out damage, and that's exactly what she did.
Yep, that is correct, Thunder. And I do think too that a very large part is to Nabquan for not losing their cool. I understand the ability to sort of, see those early kills slip by, especially in a scenario where it's certainly, kind of a matchup, as we mentioned, to your favor. But I think nonetheless, there was a bit of a slip up on the side of the Razorbacks, who, after Aurelia had a little bit of a comeback and a shutdown on that GP, uh, kind of did not respect their opponent enough. And felt like the Razorbacks gave up a couple of very free kills, especially for the ugh, excuse me, especially for Give Me a Cup Twice, who had some early deaths and not a lot of, and a very late recall as well, as mentioned by Slayer, that was not great for their transformation into that red cane, which we saw was performing as intended, but not as strong as they needed it to in order to
Mhm.
compete with what we saw the monsters of Belveth and Irelia.
Yeah, and speaking of, I mean, our MVP vote has concluded, and I believe our graphic is ready for this as well. It is, of course, Goldfan in that jungle position. We're 2 for 2 on jungle MVPs so far. A phenomenal Belveth performance, the Empress of the Void, 4, 2, and 3, 15,774 damage, carrying the team through. Picked up, I only had to pick up the Blade of the Rune King, the Immortal Shield Bow, to make it happen. Congratulations to Goldfan on the MVP, and congratulations once again to Astronauts for taking that game home. But we'll go ahead and talk really briefly now. You have one more game for the evening. We'll move on just a little bit, and we got the steaks. All right, they're not overcooked, they're not well done, but they are here and they are tender. So Falcons and Dragons both have 9 wins. Unicorns took down Falcons. They are 10 and 10. So, unless like nothing else crazy can happen, Dragons, like, this is it. The Dragons have played their games. Falcons have one more game. Unicorns have one more game. One way so right now, if Falcons win, they're tied with Unicorns in Group B. Unicorns have the head-to-head. If Falcons lose, Dragons have the head-to-head against Falcons. So, unfortunately, we're not streaming the Falcons game. We are streaming the Unicorns game, though, and Unicorns can completely cement themselves as the 3rd seed up against Vipers in this next game. So I will say to the both of you, Unicorns have locked it in. And we said, hey, maybe they're not going to be able to do it. They're already 2-0 on the day. They've locked it in, Slayer. How are we feeling?
I mean, what I said wasn't wrong necessarily, right, Thunder? I mean, I said that they have trouble closing out weeks, but
That is true. That is true.
who cares about closing out a week if you can close out, or you can get off work early? And it looks like they got off work early, right? So they already slayed themselves into playoffs. I will say, though, that if they want to make sure that they are in that 3rd seed, which, looking at the way the standings have brought out, it's the difference between, I believe, it's the difference between playing versus you either face the Bandits team or you face the Astronauts on the other side. So you still want to win this game to say, hey, we're in the 3rd spot, because nobody wants to run into the now 19-2 Astronauts of Group A. So it's not going to be easy, though, either, because the Vipers, they love to 3-0 weeks, right? We've seen it a couple of times, and I believe they've already at 2-0 as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be an easy game, but I expect the Unicorns to certainly play their hearts out to try and make sure they can avoid the Astronauts in round 1 of the postseason.
Yeah, taking down the Falcons is definitely a big win for them. Baldingos, we can go ahead and come to you again. Vipers, they've looked really strong. We've harped on this a little bit. I think this is a talking point that we can drop a little bit, but they started off the season really weak. I think they were 0-6 in the first 2 weeks. They're now sitting very comfortably up here. They're 13-7. I think they took like 1 loss last week or something like that. I think they may be 1-2, but they've picked back up right where they left off. They're still feeling strong here. A win over the Unicorns would just continue to cement them. How are we feeling about the Vipers? I'm not going to sit here and say that they're my favorites going in the playoffs, but like, if you take out the first 2 weeks, they have like the same amount of wins, if not more, than Crusaders and Astronauts.
Well, you mentioned earlier how unicorns, that's kind of a strange thing, how unicorns have an issue closing out a night. And I do think that after a 2-0 intro for for the wrap up of the group stage, I think really when we talk about them not being able to close out nights, part of that may just be fatigue. I mean, we all
Right.
understand the strain, much to the dismay of other individuals I know who say, "Ooh, esports isn't a sport." That's irrelevant, all right? Have you sat down and played 3 League of Legends matches? Have you
Yeah.
sat there and yelled at your computer for 3 hours?
Mhm.
Okay? Once you've done that, then we can talk. But I say again, with the unicorns, assuming that this theme continues, I think Vipers are going to be going up against some war-torn veterans. They are tired. They are maybe ready to just call it a night. They said, "Hey,
Yep.
we've done it. All right, we've got our place in the playoffs. That's the end of it." Or they'll say, "All right, we've done it twice. Let's do it one more time." And so, I think really it does come down to the unicorns' mental right now.
Mhm.
If they have the energy and the will to push past whatever walls they may have in their closing outs and pull it up against the Vipers, or if the Vipers will remain strong and shut the unicorns down for the final match of the evening.
Yeah, well, we will have to see, and of course, we will keep you updated as best we can on the results of Kim games. Again, this group is still not technically locked. While again, if my math is correct, have locked in playoffs, just maybe not their exact positioning. Falcons and Dragons, they are still in contention, so we'll keep you updated. But we'll take a very brief break before we ready into our game number 3, our final game of the night, the final game of the regular season, boys. So don't go anywhere, Twitch chat. Stay in those seats.
Greetings.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I was unmuted and was scrambling, or I was muted and was scrambling to unmute myself because I accidentally clicked the button. But we are back, and again, of course, we have our teams for the night: Unicorns and Vipers getting into the lobby. I'm sure they're filling it up, and we'll be getting into that game relatively quickly. But we'll just make a few short points once again before we get into the game. And honestly, I want some spicy predictions. I want you to make just a wild call. I don't care what it is. It can be who wins. Maybe you think Unicorns winning is spicy, again, based off of our previous predictions for the evening. Maybe. Or hey, maybe we get something like, I don't know, like Yumi mid. Maybe, who knows? We saw some chat that people want to maybe do some for funning it. I don't know, but Slayer, give me your spiciest take that you possibly can about this game.
Oh gosh, well, I do have the insider information that the idea of for funding it has been thrown around, not just by Twitch chat. So do with that what you must, everybody at home. So spiciest take. What could I possibly think? All right, here I'll throw your spiciest take out there. They're subbing. Vipers are subbing in an AD carry here for this final game. It's gonna be Hero Joe, not Nickel, and he one tricks AD carry on hit Thresh. That will be picked in the AD carry slot for the Vipers. There you go.
You know what?
Does that suffice, Thunder? That's pretty high. I can't get crazier than that.
That. I don't know if that's spicy or just like you threw in a bunch of spices and now it just tastes weird. Like I don't like that. Might just be just like here's the wall to hit with your spaghetti. And you like threw it that way. So, hey, you know what? We take those Baldingos. It gave you a little bit more time to think, though. What do we got? What are we thinking?
Well, first of all, Thunder, I'm a little confused as to why you'd be throwing spaghetti at a wall, but that's besides the
See
point.
if what sticks, you know?
But I think in a spicy world, Vipers and Unicorns decide that because they're both locked in, they ARAM in the middle and then end up getting banned from the tournament for match fixing.
Oh,
Therefore,
no.
blowing the brackets wide open for the Falcons, Dragons, and actually, no, the Rattlers.
No, it's just Falcons
Wait.
and Dragons.
Falcons
But
and Dragons.
Well, no, because if two teams are DQ'd, does that? Oh no, wait.
no, it's just
But
Falcons and Dragons. Rattlers, no matter how you skew it, my friend, Rattlers are still out of it. I liked where your head was at. They'll find some way to get the Rattlers in. But that being said, again, this should be an exciting game. This should still be a banger. I think the teams will do something explosive. They will definitely make this fun. So, Slayer, Baldengo, take away the last draft, the last game, not only of the night, but of the VAD regular season.
What a poetic way to close it out, Thunder. We will see you on the other side to close out the VAD regular season. But Dingo, all the emotions coming through. The VAD fall season is coming to a close here, and we're getting into the final match, Unicorns Vipers, and it's Lilia banned away to start. How quickly does this get crazy for fun style, do you think?
that's a really good question, Slayer. I think that, I mean, as we mentioned before, Unicorns definitely struggle here on the back end of the evening, but they also they might want to stick it to the Vipers, saying, "We may be third place, but don't get too comfortable there in second. We're coming for you." And we're seeing the bans, pretty standard things. So far, no particularly meta bans, which I think does speak to potentially the let's go for fun this time. And I mean, it's similar to last game, just instant lock-ins as well. Unicorns already on the Syndra, Vipers responding with the Ornn. So I guess there is some meta to be had here, but nothing too insane. And I mean, really, Slayer, if I had to put my finger on it, I would say that this is going to be a very, I guess if we're to go by the pacing of things here and just how things are as of right now, the atmosphere, the excitement in the air, I think both teams might look to just put things away very quickly. We see the Blitzcrank, we see the Tristana, two very aggressive champions that in the early game could shut down any bot lane they want to. And with the side of Vipers, Ash, Wukong, and Ornn, some team fighting monsters as well. I may be wrong. Vipers may be looking to play the long game, unlike the Unicorns, who are seeing to maybe get an early lead and put it away right now.
Funnily enough, the Vipers, they're already 2-0. If they win this game, you've heard Thunder mention it time and time again that the battle for playoffs is between the Unicorns, Falcons, and Dragons. Well, those are 2 of the 3 of those opponents. I've already lost the Vipers. So if they beat the Unicorns, they've knocked down every single opponent that is trying to reach for one of those 2 remaining playoff spots. And I do want to point out the Blitzcrank does get locked in. And Baldingos, I remember you said you may lose your mind if this is a Blitzcrank jungle. Technically, the way if this were solo queue in assigned jungle, you know, you're going down from top. Top is the top of the draft, bottom is support. That is a Blitzcrank jungle, but how realistically do you believe this is going to be a support Blitzcrank?
I would like to think that it's more likely to be a Blitzcrank support than a Blitzcrank jungle, but I also, you know, understanding the absolute fatigue that comes after long matches, I could definitely see how someone just short circuited and said, "Fine, Blitzcrank jungle." You know, they've released their inner demons and let the violent thoughts take over. And speaking of violent, there's a very electrifying Yordle for the Vipers. And then Cho'Gath Ari. Oh no.
Well, okay.
It could be Cho'Gath.
Cho'Gath could be jungle. But this is shaping up to be Baldingo's worst nightmare. That he might have just caster cursed it.
No.
There's no way the Unicorns, in the face of playing for securing the 3rd seed of Group B, which, by the way, if you missed it earlier, if they somehow end up with the 4th seed, which is possible with tiebreakers, they'd have to face the Astronauts instead of the Bandits to open up the playoffs. So, completely crazy. This is likely more Cho'Gath jungle, so we'll hold off until we get through the client-side draft. But, Baldingos, take me through the Vipers draft, because they also have a crazy Wombo setup going on their side.
Yeah, Wombo is kind of an understatement at this point, having arguably 4 massive team fighting ults that also synergize very well into each other, leading to what could potentially be in every bit of a 4 to 4.5 second CC chain. And then you throw the Ash arrow in there, and some player on the Unicorns is having a very miserable evening right now. So I think, you know, you put it aptly. This is a Wombo comp. They're looking to team fight. They're looking to win. And when I see the I'm actually, wow. See the Yasuo, Kennen, Ornn.
Is it Kennen support, maybe?
I would have a hard time. I mean, potentially, yes. But it also, you know what it could be? It could be Yasuo ADC Ash support.
Bro.
And then Ornn top, Kennen mid, Wukong jungle, I think is one of the more likely picks in the scenario. And then on the side of Unicorns, assuming oh wow, even this is confusing.
I have a unfortunate update for you, my friend. Client side, Cho'Gath was locked in for Feathers and Fur in the top lane. So, barring anything crazy, Veigar or Feed for the Unicorns is about to lock in Blitzcrank jungle in the VAD. I do want to make a clarifying point here. I keep alluding to the fact that this game actually does have stakes. I've been proven wrong, like, by the almighty Thunder behind the scenes. The Unicorns actually do have the tiebreakers for the 3rd seed, so they don't have anything to play for either, but Pride and Blitzcrank jungle has been locked in. And unless people are going to swap around on the other side, Baldingos, it's Ornn jungle. What?
I'm so confused.
Wait, now Tristana's mid.
I mean, Tristana mid. I know a friend who scrapped his way all the way up gold with Tristana mid.
Funny.
I mean, Slayer. At this rate, I am at loss. I believe my brain is just as fried as the players on both of these teams. And I mean, we talked about a spicy match before this. This is about to be more spice than you can even measure in Scovilles. So I guess if I had to say predictions, like I said, Vipers still looking to play for team fights. Unicorns are seeming to be in a stronger 1v1 laning composition, so probably looking for picks, looking for skirmishes, and going to try and capitalize on the strengths of their individual champions. But that's all I can say here.
I'm just in awe. I'm just sitting here in awe. Obviously, this is all for fun. Both teams are here to have fun, but I'm just gonna run through the comps one more time so we have it all out there. And then Baldwin goes, give me whatever prediction you can muster, because there's no way to break down arguably any of these lanes. It's Cho'Gath versus Kennen in the top lane. It's Blitzcrank jungle versus Ornn jungle. And then it's Tristana Wukong in the mid lane. Syndra versus Yasuo AD carry battle. And then Ahri support versus Ashe support. So a lot of interesting and intriguing picks. Some of these have been buffed up as more meta picks in the eyes of Ryan on 12.19. But Baldingo's, which one of these 4 fun squads are you favoring to take the final game of the regular season of VAD?
I'm going to do this in a very conventional and uninteresting way. We're just going to go lane by lane, give a point to the winner, and with that, and then whoever has more points in the end wins. So, top lane, Cho'Gath Kennen. As far as I'm aware, that is kind of a difficult matchup for Cho'Gath, with Kennen being able to move so much, dodge those skill shots, and also who's very strong on the poke, assuming they go electrocute. That is not to, and also not to mention, I think Kennen has a bit stronger team fighting, and when synergized with the composition of his teammates, I think Kennen in that case wins the lane. So we'll go ahead and give 1 point to the side of Vipers. Looking at the jungle matchup, this Blitz jungle clear is kind of insane from what I've seen on the internet. Haven't experienced it myself and don't intend to. And I mean, Ornn jungle, it's all right, but it's a champion that struggles a lot early on, and in a composition that the unicorns have, early on is when things need to start happening. So now we've got a point for the unicorns. In the mid lane, while normally Tristana is not someone who's fun to go against, I think the Wukong here edges things out based on his passive, that increasing armor, that increasing health regen, and at least I think it's increasing armor, if I recall correctly. And not to mention, again, there's the synergy with the team comp, and especially the Yasuo, who's probably going to be a big player here. So I'll give another point to the Vipers. That's 2 Vipers, one unicorn. And this bot lane, yeah, I mean, if I had to say, it's two mages versus 2 ADCs. I think the ADCs have this early game and then fall off late game. But if the team comp of Vipers is any indication, they will be able to surpass that and work it off. So actually, I would put my money on Vipers in a very definitive fashion, 4-1.
Well, I like your logic, and I'm gonna throw it all out the window. I'm gonna make this pick for Thunder on the AST desk. The Blitzcrank jungle is gonna gap this entire clown fiesta of a game. Give me the unicorns. Well, we're wrapping up and getting set for the final game of the VAD regular season. It's unicorns and Vipers in what is gonna be one intriguing game. We're gonna go to a quick break. On the other side, that final matchup. Stay tuned, Twitch chat. back on Summoner's Rift for one final time in the VAD regular season, and we have a very fun matchup full of quirky picks left, right, and center. The big staple one, Unsealed Spellbook Ornn in the jungle for Gale versus Lethal Tempo Blitzcrank jungle for Vygar Feed. And I guarantee you, we all were thinking the same thing. Yes, you have to invade on Blitzcrank jungle, and it looks like the Unicorns are going to go right through bot. And Viper's set up pretty defensively. There's the ward. They're going to spot out the entirety of the invade, and it looks like Viper and company are just going to mail it in. They're like, we knew this was coming. We're not going to give an inch. They're going to hide in a death brush of their own, but it's unlikely any of them are going to clear it. Versia steps away out of the bush for a moment. And barring anything crazy here, Baldingos, it's actually going to be kind of undramatic.
I don't think you're allowed to pull the barring anything crazy card because this matchup to begin with is already crazy. Never in a million years would I have thought I'd see a Lethal Tempo Blitzcrank. And also, can somebody explain to me when the last time you saw an unsealed spellbook? In all honesty.
I've actually Unsealed Spellbook Ornn, I feel like is kind of, I swear it used to get picked a lot. I maybe. Don't quote me on that one. I haven't seen it in the jungle ever, Baldingos. That I will give you.
Yeah, I mean, we see the jungle split. I'm still at absolute loss here, but
vertical jungling, baby.
Vertical jungling. Amen to that. And speaking of amen, there's a prayer being answered as Sunny is charmed by Amanaki on that bottom lane. And as we'll move across to, yes, we do have a split jungle. I think, you know, coming to our senses, coming to assuming that these teams are here to play, which it appears they are, there is going to be, I think,
hold on,
what was mentioned.
Amikani, Scatter the Weak, first blood to the mage-bound bottom lane. Hero Joe, pack your bags. You're gonna have to retreat under tower.
Ooh, speaking of retreat, Blitzcrank coming up on the Ornn in the jungle, might be chasing him down.
Oh boy, you know, he lets him go. He lets him go. Gale escapes to back to his camps, but it was highlighted by Thunder. What about this clear from Blitzcrank? He just speeds along the map and is able to take away so many camps. He is down CS right now, though, as the vertical jungling has broken away, but he's setting up for a gank. I don't know if Dark Python, yeah, he did see Blitzcrank, so they have an idea. Here comes a potential collapse as Gale's going to start up his red buff. He spots out Vygar or Feed, but he is way too low to start this exchange on his own. He's going to have to smite red buff. They exchange smites. Bunch of healing over to the Blitzcrank. They trade flashes, but the Blitz, he can't catch up to that pesky Forge God. In the mid lane we go now. Tosi and Pillars trading blows as well, but we got to get back up to the top lane. It looks like Dark Python is still chasing down this Blitzcrank. Level 2. The Cho'Gath comes to rescue him for the time being with a nice knockup. And as we go to the bottom lane again, action continues. Scatter the Weak. There's a good toss of the minion by the Syndra. I honestly bet Dingoes, I'm surprised we haven't had more kills by this point.
Honestly, yeah, I'd have to agree, Slayer. The amount of aggression that we're seeing here, like just like that, a flash into the charm for Amanaki doesn't secure a kill, but makes a statement. I am not going to let you move anywhere in this lane. And now that I am sort of watching it here, the oppression of this Devil Mage bot lane, considering the amount of CC, is kind of oppressive. I think it's mainly due in part to the fact that all of these shots can go straight through minions, and there's a lot of poke and a lot of quick trades happening.
There's another charm. Scatter the Weak. Versailles finds a kill of his own again. It's traded back by Hero Joe. We go back towards the topside jungle. No kills just yet, and Hero Joe pops the Summoner's Heal from Versailles. Actually, the flash as well. Lethal Tempo to proc. Out of all odds, I wouldn't have bet the bottom lane would have 3 kills at this point in the game, but nonetheless, that's the reality we live in, Baldingos.
That is the reality we live in. And another reality is the reality that at our now 5-minute mark, nothing particularly interesting.
Oh!
Flash. Oh, no!
No!
Oh, Hero Joe.
Just at Oh
It's
my god.
no longer the hero. Gets absolutely outplayed by Versia. And is now might have to hit that 10 death power spike on the Yasuo.
Oh no.
That we know and love. I mean, you talk about kills. The kills are starting to rack up. And surprising, we haven't seen too much action here on this mid lane. Tristana is definitely a champion. Although, never mind. That's not surprising. By virtue of the fact that Tristana is a champion in this mid lane that is characterized by very heavy all-ins. And I think that in the event that you all-in on a Wukong, it's definitely not the ideal play, as he's just going to end up healing a lot of that back up and also mitigating a good chunk of that damage with his extra armor that he gets in his passive. So I think good plays here from SP Pillars, not going too crazy, but it also does seem to create a bit of a dead zone here. And I think ultimately the action and the determining factor of this match at this rate will have to be on this bot lane, as all these other lanes are in matchups that simply don't allow them to make plays. And maybe we'll see SP Pillars roam off of that mid lane, but until then, especially while their teammates are pushed up, it's gonna be all quiet here on the bot, on the Summoner's Rift, with exception of the bot lane. And you know, 2 kills on the Syndra in a team like this where you have the Kennen, rather than another frontliner. We could see something happen. Oh,
yeah, look at that. Dark Python flashes forward, slicing Maelstrom will land. Ornn doesn't get the knockup, but Ignite and the Shuriken finishes it off. So we got some action in the bottom lane, and the top lane doesn't disappoint either. And it now sees the Vipers getting a kill back to bring the goalie back together, as the bottom lanes are close to getting ultimates. Versailles does have level 6 now, and oh boy, lane gank from the Blitzcrank, and he's stupidly fast with Moby's knockup. Hero Joe, he's trying to line up the hook. There it lands into Scatter the Weak. Hero Joe trying to turn it, but it's a killing spree for Versailles. What a play. Moby's OP. Man, about Dingoes, that's all I had to say.
It's like a nightmare. It's like I'm playing Valor and they're playing Faye. Just nightmares everywhere. That Blitz moving like a bat out of hell, comes out of the bush, hits the hook, and Hero Joe is at loss for what to do, as would anybody reasonable. I mean, look at the damage. He's just got Mobies and he's doing that much damage. And SP Pillars, you know, I said they got to move off the lane, and there they are, ripping into that dragon. And I honestly don't recall. I believe, yes, this is Unicorns will secure themselves their first Drake. And I don't know, Slayer. You know, we talk about Unicorns fumbling their last game of every night, and in this case, we might see them not. We might see them pick up a win here.
Yeah, that could be the reality. I mean, I tried to warn you about Dingo. Remember, Thunder did tell us Blitzcrank jungle can gap, but right now the gap seems to be with Versailles on this AP carry Syndra, who has now been morphed into a much better scaling opponent to face in the mid lane. It still applies in the bot lane right now, as they are currently on a 3-0-1 scoreline. 300 gold bounty, certainly nothing to scoff at either, as we might be getting a gank coming along, though. Here comes Gale with the response. Call of the Forge God gets set up, last breath real well, and there it comes across. Heal for Aminaki, and that Spirit Rush will keep her out, but look at the mage damage. Aminaki executes Hero Joe, and Sunny, you are up too far, my friend. Scatter of the Weak doesn't find the Ashe, who will be able to escape just within the grasp of death, and it's just Gale left to protect. But oh my god, look at that. Enchantalized Crystal Arrow comes across, but a flash pull to a minion. Vigar or Feed can't save the Syndra, who will be promptly shut down, and now that pesky Moby Boots Blitzcrank, all he can do is watch Gale flash out of the way, but oh my god, he's not done. Moby's is prompted again.
Oh my gosh,
W
he's
forward.
moving.
He's chasing him down. The hook lands, knocks him into the air, chilling smite, and there's your kill. Vigar or Feed avenges his counterpart in the bottom lane. Stupid amount of action towards that side of the rift, and I'm gonna be honest with you, Baldingos, we're not done. Vega or Feed is going to try and Hex Flash away from the enemy blue buff. He fails. He's not going to try and secure the buff. He picks it up, and Hero Joe is allowed a free hit. He will pick up the kill, but the Ari shows up. Charm lands. Hero Joe dies for a 4th time, and Sunny is also claimed as well as the Tristana picks up a huge double kill. Well, they goes, what just happened? Everywhere in the bottom side of the map.
Slayer, I think we're gonna have to say goodbye to Victoris Esports on Twitch because we're gonna get banned for graphic content. I mean, this Blitzcrank is something that should not be seen by mortal eyes. I think, you know, Vega or Feed, they're on the bot lane, found themselves in a very rough situation, whether to chase down Sunny to secure the kill or go after Gale to maybe help their teammate. And speaking of help, he runs into the mid lane. It's happening again. Oh my gosh, how many jumps? SP pillars.
Oh, the arrow!
Oh, it misses. How did that miss?
And he hops right away, and now not only do you have a fed Syndra if you're the Vipers, Balding goes, this Tristan is now 3-0-0 as well.
Yeah, but before the buffoonery occurred in the mid lane, you know, I say again, Vega or Feed was left with a rough decision there.
He's back again.
Oh, he's back. Look at how fast he's moving, those arms cranking.
Oh, he doesn't get the kill though, but Aminaki secures onto Sunny. Call the forward god from Gale will lie on 3, but he's all alone. Hero Joe is way too scared to walk up to this god of a Blitzcrank jungle, and it's another kill picked up for the Unicorns, and they might be looking for a bit more here. Hero Joe is pretty low under the turret. He might be susceptible to a dive potentially here. There's Scour the weak lands. The crystallized arrow comes across. There's a knockup onto the Ari, but the Syndra ultimate makes sure Hero Joe can't do anything with last breath. And now we switch to the mid lane where Pillars trades back and forth with Wukong, but is able to get the rocket jump out of there. And oh boy, Vanguard Feed is back.
Moving.
He knocks
even
up
on the mini map. It's
ridiculous. Again. Well, Tristana is exhausted, flashes away from the contest, and Vanguard Feed doesn't have enough damage to get anything done. But big takeaway: 11-4 in the kill department for the Unicorns. They're cruising.
They're cruising. Our Blitz jungle now at a little bit under 50% kill participation. Honestly, at this rate, Slayer, I think if the Vipers are looking to keep themselves up and out of this, there's just too many threats to deal with now. You mentioned the Tristana's fed, the Syndra's fed, and even the Ari. The Ari support has gotten a substantial amount of kills in gold, even a shutdown to their name. And it's definitely, it is not a good look for the Vipers here. They do need to find their team fights, and maybe then they'll shine, but before then they have a very large gap to close, and hopefully they can, lest they get lest their Nexus fall pre-20 minutes.
Well, it looks like the recipe for Unicorns to beat their end of the day woes was just simply Blitzcrank jungle. I mean, I don't know what else to say at this point. In all reality, the Blitzcrank jungle is doing well. He's not the main factor. I mean, there's 11 kills on this Rift, and 7 of them are in the bottom lane right now, where Vanguard Feed has been present. There's a flash. He hooks another, and that is Sunny being taken out in the blink of an eye. This man can do no wrong. Blitzcrank jungle better be banned for the entirety of playoffs.
I think that may be a genuine possibility at this rate. Peeking up into the top lane. We see an AD Cho'Gath.
Oh, that's Trinity Force.
Trinity Force Cho'Gath?
I didn't even notice. Oh boy, but the lot lane action isn't even over yet. Call the Forge God, okay. Gale didn't hit Call the Forge God back towards the opposing team. And now Gale is being jumped on by Vanguard Feed. He gets hooked, but he was unstoppable, so he doesn't get pulled back across the wall. That was a clutch timing there, and it looks like Vanguard Feed is just going to turn his Armada onto the second Drake secure for Unicorn.
There's something so oppressive. I think even just the movement of this Blitz jungle, what that is so far the thing that shocks me the most is how fast that Veigar Feet is moving around this jungle and isn't even that far behind in CS in comparison to OFFG. And here it comes again.
Doesn't need CS Valdegos. He's killing everybody on the map. Pillar's set up for a 4th kill. He's on a rampage. Veigar Feet perfectly silences Wukong so the hook will land. We go to the bot lane though, Sunny. Another channel-like Cristed arrow. Exhaust gets on top of Syndra as well, but she's able to flash away. And the turn might come. Amanaki, charm, Q, kill for Versailles, her 5th of the game. The Unicorns are up 10 kills in the kill department, and now 4K gold, along with 4-6 to flash for the 1700th time. Amanaki, calm down, sir. You are getting too crazy down there.
It's crazy at this point. That was an excellent bait from the side of the Unicorns. And speaking of baits, oh, wow.
What is going on? Oh boy, AD Cho'Gath, there's the bite. See you later, poor Yordle. Dark Python punished heavily for trying to go for a play on to Tristana. And if you missed it, the turret fell in the bottom lane, and Versailles picked up a 6th kill. So Sunny dies again. The 0-6 Yasuo. Valdez, how about morphing it into the 2-12 bot lane for the Vipers? That's close enough, right?
That's kind of mean, Slay.
You were talking about the 0-10 power spike. I felt like.
I mean,
close.
yes, but the 0-10 power spike. First of all, it can't come, right? There's no O. There's no O in this equation, all right? Now, I do understand that our friend playing Wukong is familiar with an individual named Owen, as they are still 0-2 at the 20-minute mark. Regardless of that,
Sunny's 0-7. Sunny's 0-7.
We're watching this, and it's.
I don't have words.
I don't have words either. This is better than a clown fiesta. This is better than an ARAM. This is the absurdity of the universe collapsing in on itself, and we'll see if the collapsing of this Wukong can work on this Tristana. Actually, yes. An 800 gold shutdown. Hop twice and place, yes. And wow, that is quite that's quite something. So hopefully Wukong is longer familiar with it. Oh my gosh, he's moving.
He missed a hook. He's mortal. He's mortal, ladies and gentlemen. Veigar Feet misses the hook onto Dark Python. 23 kills in 17 minutes. It's a 7K gold lead for the Unicorns, who are sporting a Moby Boots tank Blitzcrank jungle with lethal tempo and a fully AD itemized Cho'Gath from Feathers to Fur, who is also 1-1-1 and is up in CS against a ranged cannon. He just knocked down the top outer. But Nicholas, I'm going to ask you the hard question. If you're the Vipers, how do you win this game?
You ask me an impossible question. I assure you I'm no genius. I think best case scenario here, the 3 carries here are all very squishy. There's strong CC that can come in from every champion for the Vipers, and strong CC that you can then in turn chain into lots of damage from the Yasuo, from the Kennen, and who also, I'd point out, the Kennen at least is not too far behind here, maintaining themselves a Proto Build and Sorcerer Boots. So if the Vipers want to win this, 2 things. 1, they have to look for team fights or picks, like what might happen to our friends for Feathers and Fur here.
Yeah, but look at this. The Armada is coming, and that's a 4-man silence from Veigar Feet. Scatter the weak lands onto 2. Call the Forge God will turn around and hit 3. But it looks like Hero Joe won't be able to find the turn onto the Tristana, who flashes away, and the health bars are depleting. SP Pillars takes 1. Scatter the Weak finds another. Amanaki on a rampage. Toast C will try to turn around with the Cyclone, but finds absolutely nothing. And Dark Python is executed by the AD Cho'Gath. It's an ace for the Unicorns. Wow.
An ace for the Unicorns and nothing for the Vipers to say for it. I guess Slayer, I said they had to look for the team fight. They looked for the team fight and they lost.
Hard.
They lost hard. You know, Vagar or Feed did miss a hook during that fight, but it didn't matter. Ooh, but that Ashe ult may have just landed on the Tristana. Yes, they're stunned. They're completely helpless, but they managed to jump away because it's the slimiest. It is the slimiest ADC in the game. And so, crawling up to the 21-minute mark here, we see 23 kills for the side of Unicorns, as well as 3 Drakes, 4 towers, or excuse me, 5 towers. I mean, it's rough if you're the Vipers right now. Whether their head is in it or not, I wouldn't know. I honestly would have to see where some of these picks came out from. Because while I think in a vacuum, a lot of these picks are fairly strong, there are certain things that come into question, such as the orange jungle, which in concept sounds like an appealing idea until you realize how abysmally slow his clear actually is. And then there's the Yasuo ADC, which has some strengths, but I think with how aggressive and well coordinated Viriazi and Amanaki are for the bot lane, it's certainly not where Yasuo shines, to say the least.
Well, Nichols, I have a question for you. You talked about 0-10 power spike for Yasuo. Is there an 0-10 power spike for support Ashe?
I am sorry, Slayer, but I cannot, within reason, state to you confidently that there is in fact such thing as an 0-10 power spike.
Oh, no.
Oh, but that's a spike. Oh my god.
Vigar or Feed, excuse me, just took Gale to the cleaners. He's dead again in the Baron pit. They're on Nash at 21 minutes. Dark Pythons, though, he jumps into the pit. He doesn't get a single stun. A Buster shot by Pillars is perfectly timed, and the Yordle is sent packing. I don't care what champions they're on. The back row is stupidly solid for the Unicorns in this game, nonetheless.
I mean, that Blitzcrank hits a hook and you get taken to the Shadow Realm. This is disaster. This is a massacre. This is everything that a nightmare can be made of and more if you're the Vipers.
Amanaki stamps another kill as the Yasuo falls to 2 and 8. There are bounties on 4 members of the Unicorns as they push into the base at 22:45 on the clock. They knock down the mid inhibitor and they will back out confidently. The biggest takeaway, Bendigos, I want your opinion on this take. I will riot if Vigar or Feed is not the MVP of this game.
You know, I would like to agree with that for the absolute, parody of life that is an MVP Blitzcrank jungle.
1-1-14.
1-1-14, yes, and also an impressive amount of CS considering the fact that it's bloody Blitzcrank, and also the amount of ganking and SP Pillars is just wow.
He landed another one.
Oh my gosh, triple kill in the top lane and split across the map. Hero Joe has to be the hero here as all the towers are crumbling. His teammates are dying. Slayer, I can't handle this, okay? I went to Buffalo Wild Wings the other night. I had the original Buffalo. I was planning on getting the Reapers, but I wasn't feeling it that night. Look, I was ready for this, but I wasn't feeling it. And my mind is blown by what we're seeing here. A 26 kill lead. Look at the damage. I mean, Verasi just one-shot Hero Joe. What can't they do? It's an absolute massacre here in the Summoner's Rift.
I'm pretty sure if North America had picked this comp on group stage, we'd have a team in the knockouts. That's where I'm at mentally. I'm at the extremes. Put Closer on this Blitzcrank jungle. They can do no wrong, but nonetheless, the Unicorns are certain to be Victorious here in Victoris' final regular season game of the VAD. There's just so many fun avenues. Let's take a moment here as Sunny's going to get absolutely evaporated by Versailles. Nothing's new here. What is your favorite build path that you're seeing from the 5 members of the Unicorns? Because there's a couple of picks that I think you could go for.
You see, I do actually play a little bit of Cho'Gath. I think I mentioned this. I mentioned this on the stream the other day. You know, when it comes to my picks, when it comes to the top lane, it's either Camille or Cho'Gath. And so, with that in mind, I do like to see the Titanic Hydra for that extra AD as Cho'Gath continues stacking health. So, you know, that's not bad. I think the Blitzcrank build does make a lot of sense. So, you know, nothing is too crazy here. And so, yeah, I would say Cho'Gath, Trinity Force, Titanic Hydra. What I think is going to be a Starox Gauge after this, that's my favorite build so far. And also, I got to shout out the PTA as well.
Of course. Shout out to the PTA. Flashes galore, and Amanaki sets one up for a charm. That is an 0-12 support Ash. Tosi tries to jump on the entirety of this Unicorn roster, but they're too fed. They slapped him with their wallets. Orin drops as well. That is a rampage for Feathers and Fur, and with super minions pouring into the red side base. Unless Dark Python, yeah, he can't even get in range for Slicing Maelstrom. Buster shot it back to his turret. He is silenced, and he is executed. Hero Joe Windwall's the final hook from Vhagar or Feed on this Blitzcrank jungle, but it won't matter because that Blitzcrank jungle and company are victorious. 38-5 in kills. The Unicorns win the final game of the VAD regular season in the most intriguing and thrilling fashion possible. And right after that, Dingoes, I'd love to hear your points, but we have to get Thunder back in here right off the bat. Thunder, I'm assuming, go ahead and pick your jaw off the ground. It just happened. Yes, that was your Blitzcrank juggle. Take me through the emotion.
I was just so ecstatic. Right, like I saw that get picked. I saw that show up in the draft, and immediately I knew in my soul, I knew Tristana Blitzcrank would actually be a phenomenal kill lane. I knew that would be the reasonable and rational thing to do. I also knew that Unicorns would not do the reasonable nor the rational thing. And so we had that absolute chaos of a game. The Blitzcrank jungle absolutely showed up. Baldingo, I know it was your nightmare. It was my euphoria. Slayer, of course, phenomenal calls. You can only do so much with a game like that, and we'll try our best to talk about it and give you some analysis, but clearly these teams were just out there having a blast. Baldingo, Unicorns, they were actually able to close it out, and I think this was something to your point. They were burned out. They were war-torn. But last game of the night, they decided to have a ton of fun. And again, I know Vipers weren't exactly playing optimally, but Unicorns seemed to be just having a great time, both obviously enjoying it, and they played well.
They did play well, Thunder. There's no doubt about that. And before we go further, I do want everybody to recall, go vote for your MVPs. Because I think there will be some contention here.
There better not be.
Amongst our analysts concerning who might deserve it. But you know, the
I will walk off set.
The
just walk out of frame.
I'll just wheel out. I'll just like push myself.
What is it? Pulls a Grizzly and just falls out of his chair. But
of course.
Regardless,
continue your point.
Yes, my point is that the shocking efficacy of the Blitzcrank jungle, I think, did come from the fact that Vhagar or Feed was first of all, building the Mobies was, I think, a very good play because it allowed Vhagar or Feed to stay in the lanes for a lot longer. You know, while the their farm was not as spectacular, these gangs, especially some of the lane gangs that we saw on the bot lane, which I'll come back to later, saw so much progress made off of them. Because that was another thing to point out too, is that Astronauts wrong team. Unicorns. Unicorns were able to capitalize off of these kills and off of these picks that they were getting. And not to mention, they were staying away from the team fights that I said they should be looking out for from the Vipers, seeing that team composition that they had. But then even when we saw the team fights happen, at that point, it was too much. The Unicorns had upgraded to Pegasuses, and they had left the Summoner's Rift flying into the playoffs with an absolute banger.
Indeed. And of course, we do have our playoff brackets locked, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. First and foremost, we do, of course, have our MVP of the game. It's Vagar feed. It's the Blitzcrank, absolute banger of a game. Cranking those 90s. Talk about a zoomer. 1-1-17 on the Blitz jungle. 126 farm, but who needs it when you're killing everybody, making everything happen everywhere? Only 8,878 gold. Not that much, but again, it doesn't matter when you just kill people. You make it happen. That's what we like to see. That's what the preseason patch is all about, baby. Again, congratulations to Unicorns across the board. They did really well. Feathers and Fur, I think, was just kind of having a good old game, being the Cho'Gath lumbering around, but Vergia, Amianki, SP Pillars all played phenomenally. So again, congrats on the 3-0 week. I don't know if that's Unicorn's first 3-0 week, but it might have been. What a heck of a way to close out the split. That being said, we can come back to the desk very briefly. There's not much else to talk about for that game. I quite frankly, it was what it was. We have slightly more serious things to talk about before we sign off for the night. Playoffs have been locked in. For our bracket, I don't think we have any graphics to pull up for it, but I can go ahead and tell you the matchups. So for our first match, we have Astronauts versus Dragons, who have qualified because Falcons lost to Crusaders and Dragons had the head-to-head. Falcons, it looked like, looking at the match result, it wasn't like they got stomped, but Crusaders definitely knew what they were doing and took them to task. So Dragons still were able to make it in by the good graces of the Crusaders, despite getting slain by them in the middle of our day. So Astronauts versus Dragons is one of our matchups. Vipers versus Razorbacks is another of our matchups. Notably, Vipers did lose to Razorbacks in intergroup play. Astronauts beat Dragons in intergroup play, if anybody was wondering. Then we have our third match, Crusaders versus Hammerheads. Crusaders are very good. Hammerheads, they're the 4th seed coming out of Group A. People maybe have some more question marks around them. Notably, I'll hold on to that before, to the end of it. Crusaders beat Hammerheads in intergroup play. And then Bandits and Unicorns. Bandits sitting pretty comfortably in that 2nd seed slot for Group A. Unicorns coming in at 3rd seed. Bandits actually lost to Unicorns in intergroup play. So Slayer, I'll come to you first on these. How do we feel about this bracket? Honestly, I'm looking at this. We have a few banger matchups. We got a couple that I'm a little questionable about, but we at least are going to get 2 real heaters, I think.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Real heaters, perfect way to put it there, Thunder. I mean, it's the real intriguing thing is, yes, I know we're memeing because the Unicorns just played the silliest game of I'll say VAD history. I don't care if it's wrong. But they did 3-0 for the first time, all split long. I just made sure to double check that. And momentum has been brought up on multiple points for this final showcase of VAD, whether it was momentum of going into the slate, momentum in game, or momentum in general. You 3-0, you're going into playoffs, and you're matching up against a team that you mentioned you beat in intergroup play. So the Unicorns, I know we all hyped up the Vipers as this, I know you said, Thunder, the Vipers are looking like this team that maybe will back as a dark horse. I think it also, the Unicorns have a say in that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, again, they performed well today, and again, it was for fun, but they looked good so far today. So I will say, I just, Slayer, before we go over to Baldingo, I do want to say, how do you feel about going from saying Unicorns might not make it to being a sleeper dark horse for winning the whole thing?
You know what? If I get proven wrong by the Church of Blitzcrank Jungle, there's nothing I can do but apologize. And I am sorry, Unicorns. I was wrong. Thank you for proving me wrong in the most fun way possible.
We love to see it. And Baldingo, for you, again, these matchups, we got some interesting ones. We might have some upsets. You never know. That's, these teams played once in the middle of the season, so things have definitely changed. But again, this is playoffs, right? They start next week. So teams got time to prep. Do we think we're going to see any upsets? What's exciting about this for you?
I would say that, well, what's exciting about this for me is that after seeing the cross group play, we look at the standings as they were now. Group A was definitely a bit of a mixer with two teams not quite up to the task, and ultimately sort of weighing the group a little heavier towards the winning side, while Group B was a little more even,
Right.
minus our friends at the Rattlers. And so to be able to see this, the greater depth of this cross match play,
Mhm.
I think will prove to be a very strong, I guess, equalizer, catalyst, or otherwise
Right.
for these matches, as well as if I'm correct, we are doing these in best of 3 series, correct? Or is it
Yes,
best of
these
5?
will be best of
Wonderful.
three. So those drafts are going to get real interesting.
Exactly. And so when we, take that into account, and with how these teams play, with how they pick and how they ban, I think it's going to get a lot more technical than it
Right.
has, in these group stages. You can play against these teams, and while there is stakes, I think there's this feeling, there's almost a disconnected feeling in the sense that we have time to prepare for this match. Maybe we'll play against them again. And if not, all right, it's fine. We move on to the next match. Here in the playoffs, you're one and done.
Yep.
These teams are going to have to prepare meticulously. And I think with that mentality, they're going to bring so much more to the table than we saw in the group stage, which I
Right.
must say was already a lot. And
Yeah.
to be able to see this level of performance come from them, I think is what's going to make this such a absolute heater, as you said.
Yeah. I'm personally very excited for these matches. Again, they're just going to be fun. I love seeing these groups battle against each other once again. And I just have, a couple of quick notes that, I'll ask, I'll see how y'all feel about this. So astronauts, they only have 2 losses, right? Only 2. Can you guess who those losses were?
Oh gosh.
They both made the playoffs.
They both made the playoffs.
They're
I'm gonna
And
both in
wager.
there.
are they two
I'm
different teams?
It's 2 different teams. Yes, it's 2 different teams.
I'm gonna wager their Group B opponents both. I'll guess the Vipers. I'll go Vipers Crusaders for the 2 teams they lost to.
I
Reasonable,
will
reasonable.
I will say Vipers, and there's something inside me that says unicorn for no particular reason. So I'm gonna say Vipers and unicorns.
So here's the thing. Crusaders, they did lose to the Crusaders. The other
Uh
team they lost to, I think it was all the way back like week 1 or 2, was Hammerheads.
Oh,
And Crusaders and the
oh.
Hammerheads are playing in the first round.
wow.
So that is something I want to keep an eye out on. Again, Hammerheads, they haven't really been able to show that type of performance in a little while, I think. I honestly, looking at this is not to, dunk on Hammerheads. There has to be an 8th team in the bracket. There has to be a lowest seed. We're looking at Hammerheads. I'm a little bit more iffy on them as a team, but they've shown that potential. One of the only 2 teams to take down Astronauts. I don't know if they're going to be able to take down Crusaders, but that's something I do want to watch out for. Other than that, notably, Crusaders, they are on the same side of the bracket as Bandits, who also managed to beat them. So we got some exciting stuff. Again, this is playoffs. These are best of 3s. Once you get into these drafts, once you actually play a team multiple times, things are always going to get more exciting, a little bit different. But this is, of course, our final stream of the regular season, Slayer and Baldingo. So we can go ahead, we can sign off just a little bit. Make sure those stream numbers don't drop too low. But hey, everybody looking at you in Twitch chat before we sign off, before I give my boys their last words for the evening, make sure you follow the Victoris content. I'm pretty sure we still got playoffs going on. I think there's finals this week or something. It's been a crazy day, but we made the stream happen. There's going to be more Victoris content again all week, probably a little bit earlier. So make sure you tune in. But Baldingo, I'll come to you first. Any final words, any thanks, moans, complaints, shout outs, whatever you got.
I will be going to see a therapist shortly after this for the side of a Blitzcrank jungle. But besides that, Thunder, thank you so much for hosting. Slayer, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, our socials are posted down below. Please go follow these beautiful people with me. And as well as thank you so much for watching, for joining us. Slayer, any last words, brother?
My last words are simple. There are so many interesting upsets that are potentially going to set up for these VAD playoffs, with the fact that so many of these teams have actually hold losses in intergroup play, like the fact that the Crusaders, 3 of their 4 losses came to Group A opponents. They have to take one on at the beginning of the playoff run. So you got to stay locked to VAD playoffs. It's going to be an absolutely amazing time to see which one of these teams can hoist that trophy. And of course, yes, a shout out again to the amazing Thunder, our host, and Baldingos. It was an absolute pleasure losing our mental sanity with that last game. And also a special shout out behind the scenes to Quintic as well, the producer, making sure everything looks beautifully produced and broadcasted here on Victoris. So it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And that's all I have. It's up to you, Thunder.
Of course, double shout out to Quinn making it happen. We were scrambling for a producer. They stepped in, they made it work. We got it done, and it was a wonderful broadcast through and through. Slayer, Baldingo, thank you so much for putting on a phenomenal performance this evening and bringing us absolute bangers. That last game was a roller coaster of emotions. I personally was just ecstatic the whole time. I don't need to go see a therapist. That was my type of therapy. But for you in chat, make sure you get some good sleep. Again, catch Victoris content all this week and us next week for playoffs. Until then, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.